Part 51. I'm Really Immortal. Author, Chulian Kuikan Rusiahua. Chapter 513. Bai Hui didn't take the subway back. She couldn't take a taxi on the way. Seeing that she was dirty and had to go into the city to cross the river, she stopped a few taxis. The driver asked but was unwilling to take passengers, so Bai Hui had to take a taxi. I bought a special car, and then said to give red envelopes to the driver, because it might stain his floor mats and seats. The master smiled and said it didn't matter, it was just like that a lot of times, if we pay attention to each other, everyone's attitude would be very good. Back in the dormitory, the other three girls Yan Xiang, Li Hongman, and Zhao Yu were all there. They were all shocked when they saw Bai Hui covered in yellow mud. "What's going on with you? Did you jump into the river? Want to play mud fights?" Bai Hui quickly explained, "It just fell into a mud pit." Zhao Yu breathed a sigh of relief and regretted, "This dress of yours, I remember it cost more than 8,000. Bai Hui nodded. "Oh my god, my heart is bleeding," Yan Xiang said with his tongue. After Bai Hui's regular popularization, everyone also knew that many of Lolita's skirts are not expensive. Only Japanese brands are more expensive, which cost $1,000. More, 3 to 5,000, more than 10,000. Bai Hui is a little rich woman. There are some cheap ones and many expensive ones. Can it be cleaned? Li Hongman asked worriedly. You can only send it to a more professional laundry and use various detergents to remove the stains by hand bit by bit. There is a high probability that it will still be ruined. These skirts are very difficult to wash. Bai Hui sighed reluctantly, because I'm not feeling very sad now, although a little skirt may be dying. My condolences and acceptance. Bai Hui pouted, it's just a bit embarrassing to fall into the mud in front of others. After all, she was a girl. Listening to Bai Hui's tone, several people were sensitive to some problems, and then watched Bai Hui walk briskly into the bathroom to take off her skirt. What are you doing standing at the door? Bai Hui took off her skirt, panniers, pumpkin pants, and stockings, only wearing underwear. She turned around and saw three people standing at the door, and was surprised. It's nothing, I just think you have a really good figure. White fennel is really as white as a small white pig. It is fleshy where it should be and thin where it should be. The proportions of its legs are also very well proportioned. By the standards of ordinary people, it is completely tall and slender. Bai Hui smiled slightly, took a shower in a hurry, and went to change clothes. She didn't dare to waste time. The man didn't have any awareness of meeting girls. Girls can be late. If she was going to be late, he would show off his face when meeting her. There is even a possibility of leaving directly. A date? Zhao Yu tentatively smiled. No, just meeting a friend, Bai Hui replied while carefully checking her makeup. What kind of friend? Ordinary friends. Bai Hui nodded affirmatively, then frowned and looked at her eyelashes. CL Scepter mascara was really not as versatile as its carrot dice lipstick, so she quickly changed it and applied it again. The eyelashes were curled up and straight, the eyes were big and fluttering, as if Bilibili was being discharged. Bai Hui was slightly satisfied. "Lu Chang'an," Yan Xiang suddenly shouted. Bai Hui was startled and turned around quickly to look at the door of the dormitory. Then she realized what she was doing and hit the person angrily. "What are you doing?" Seeing Bai Hui's reaction, it was probably Lu Chang'an, and several people burst into laughter. Lu Chang'an was a troubled guy at the beginning of the school year, but it has stopped recently. There is no gossip about him hitting people and causing trouble, but he has always been discussing school in the girls' dormitory. One of the handsome guy's regular customers, anyone can notice that when Lu Chang'an is mentioned, Bai Hui's expression is like a little rabbit eavesdropping. Watching Bai Hui leave, the smiles on several people's faces disappeared. Of course, the sisters in the dormitory should support their love, but Bai Hui's competitors are too strong. Maybe this corner will be dug to the end. The ground fell down with a bang and buried her. If he couldn't bury it, he would probably be smashed all over. Not optimistic. Bai Hui didn't realize the disapproval of the sisters in the dormitory. She just wanted some cute dolls. It happened that her old classmate Lu Chang'an was very good at catching dolls, so she and he went to catch some dolls and bring them back. It's pretty fast. Lu Chang'an was a little surprised. These fairies usually have too many things to do. They might have chosen a skirt first, then stockings, and then shoes. Finally, they found that this outfit didn't match, so they chose again. There was also a mess of makeup, hair, bags, and personal belongings to choose from, and I was busy for 2 or 3 hours without taking a break. It is very likely that people are waiting downstairs, and they may suddenly receive a message from her, "What should I wear today?" "How dare I make you wait?" Bai Hui muttered in a low voice. "That's true," Lu Chang'an agreed. "Otherwise, would she still want the doll?" "Lu Chang'an, in your eyes, do girls have no privileges?" Bai Hui couldn't help but ask. "I have girlfriends, but not girls." Lu Chang'an thought for a while and said. "Then what privileges does An Nuan have?" Bai Hui wanted to know this. If he likes someone, he probably means that the other person is different in his eyes. The ordinary becomes special. The advantages become dazzling. Flaws become bearable and even endearing. Being my girlfriend is a privilege. And you can also eat my saliva. Bai Hui pressed her chest to calm herself down. She was wearing tighter underwear, and that one was her favorite. She didn't want to tighten her underwear and make it less comfortable to wear in the future. The key is that this person's tone and expression are very calm, and there is no exaggeration. It seems that he is just describing things that are taken for granted. I have never seen someone so arrogant, and you still eat his saliva. He probably thinks he is a treasure. Maybe An Nuan thinks he is a treasure, and he must have been pampered by An Nuan. One day when An Nuan gets tired of it, it's best to throw him away like garbage and see if he still thinks of himself as a treasure. Actually, before, when we were playing together at Gao Dui's house, I thought about spitting in your cup." Speaking of spitting, Bai Hui remembered his previous desire to play a prank on Lu Chang'an. Said a little embarrassed. "People's hearts are unpredictable." Lu Chang'an turned around and glanced at Bai Hui. "This little girl is so bold, and everything is so bold. It's not something you can sit back and relax knowing that you have offended a girl." Bai Hui was a little proud, because Lu Chang'an knew about it and actually had no intention of settling a score with her or doing anything to her. "Your saliva must be very smelly. You are afraid that I will smell it? Anyway, you can't let me fall into the trap. It must be like this." Lu Chang'an analyzed calmly and came to the conclusion. Bai Fen's nose wrinkled up in anger. This guy, just because she said she couldn't offend girls, he had to try and see what would happen if she offended her? "Come here." This area of the roadside was deserted, and there was a small forest next to it. Bai Hui took Lu Chang'an's arm and walked into the small forest. What kind of behavior is it to pull in broad daylight? Lu Chang'an wanted to lift her up and hang her on a tree, but he decided not to do it and was pulled into the woods by her. Anyway, if she wanted to be violent to him, he would definitely resist. Arriving in the woods, Bai Hui stopped. There were faint light and shadows in the woods. Some light spots fell on her cheeks, some fell on her heaving chest, and some were just like her heartbeat, which originally swayed with the swaying of the leaves. Bai Hui stood on tiptoes. Lu Chang'an was so tall. Objectively speaking, Lu Chang'an had the best height when he was in his 3rd year of high school. Objectively speaking, his height and hers were the most suitable gap between lovers. She stood on tiptoes. He lowered his head slightly so that the two of them could kiss each other. This is just objectively speaking. Objectively speaking, he and An Nuan were inappropriate at that time. They were both about the same height. Why would a boy want a girlfriend that tall? Lu Chang'an was really tall now. Bai Hui tried her best to stand on her tiptoes. Fortunately, she often practiced dancing, so even when she stood on her tiptoes, she was still higher than ordinary girls. She stood on tiptoes and looked at his eyes very close. Her dark eyes were full of doubts, and she looked a little cute like a husky. Her white lips were slightly open, and her moist tongue was touching her teeth. Hiding behind, he blew into Lu Chang'an's nose. It smells so good. Lu Chang'an's nose moved. Bai Hui pressed his shoulder and blew into his nose seriously. While he didn't seem to react, she had to prove that she didn't have bad breath. How could a girl endure such humiliation? Bai Hui tolerates you saying she has an average appearance, Bai Hui tolerates calling her an average figure, and tolerates calling her a short man, but he absolutely cannot tolerate him saying her saliva is bad or that she has bad breath. Lu Chang'an's nose moved again. Ah, sneeze. Lu Chang'an finally sneezed, facing Bai Hui who was standing on tiptoes and blowing air into his nose. Bai Hui only felt a gentle breeze blowing on her face, as if there was a sprinkler spraying water vapor all over the vast grassland, accompanied by the smell of the grass being washed, a feeling of freshness and tranquility. But, in fact, she was just sneezed on her face. Bai Hui was stunned. I'm sorry, my body parts are actually extremely sensitive. I can usually control it subconsciously, but sometimes I can't control it. When I smell the aroma, I feel that my nasal cavity reacts with my mouth, and I don't control it for a while. Lu Chang'an explained apologetically that in fact it was not his fault. Who asked her to blow air into his nose? Only a stupid kid like Zhou Dongdong would blow into Shang Guandandan's nose, not to mention that Zhou Dongdong was trying to save someone, and he, Lu Chang'an, didn't show symptoms such as coma. You did it on purpose. Bai Hui didn't know what to do for a moment. She had never had someone sneeze on her face, and she could feel his saliva falling on her skin. No, is Lu Chang'an so bored? I hate you. Bai Hui glared at Lu Chang'an while taking a wet wipe from her bag. The wipe came out. There was alcohol on the wipe, and it would scratch her makeup. Yeah, Lu Chang'an didn't really care about others hating him. Bai Hui took a tissue and pressed it on his face. What was a little strange was that he originally thought he would be disgusted. In fact, this was also a very disgusting scene, but why didn't he feel that disgusting feeling in his heart? It must be that he hates Lu Chang'an himself far more than his stinky saliva, which temporarily suppresses the nausea. He also said that being his girlfriend gave her the privilege of eating his saliva. As a result, she sprayed his stinky saliva everywhere, and Bai Hui turned her head and her cheeks turned slightly red. You smelled it just now, does it smell bad? Bai Hui walked out of the woods with a sulky look. It stinks so much that it makes me sneeze. You just said you smelled the aroma. You heard wrong. No. Real. Why are you so annoying? Do you still want your doll? Lu Chang'an threatened with his trump card. Bai Hui had no choice but to remain silent and followed him with a depressed pout. Seeing him looking around for the claw machine, Bai Hui's face finally lost its tension and burst into a smile. Spring is in full bloom. Lu Chang'an, I think you are really funny sometimes, Bai Hui said from behind. Thank you for the compliment. Huh, this didn't seem like his answer. Lu Chang'an looked back at Bai Hui, who had little knowledge and experience, and explained, every junior high school student knows that the word dou in the word dou is actually the abbreviation of head, and head refers to the small kingdom. Historical records show that Confucius traveled around countries. In fact, Confucius has been wandering around in Shandong all his life, and the countries he traveled are the small kingdoms as big as beans. Tiao, the original meaning is to stop and go around various countries, used to describe saints. You say I am funny, which probably means I am like a saint. Bai Hui burst out laughing. In fact, she hated narcissistic people, but every time Lu Chang'an said something arrogant and ignorant, Bai Hui always found it very interesting and couldn't help but laugh out loud. A girl never really hates those who make her laugh. Do you still want to be the aloof school bully? Bai Hui quickened his pace and walked side by side with him. Even if this guy walked slowly and leisurely, his steps were always strangely long. No, why? I'm not a celebrity, so why do I create a personality? The word personality sounds very false or even hypocritical. For example, stars who sell their personality, such as Yu Buchan. Yu Buchan is a typical person who sells their personality, but we all know behind the persona of his gentleman's sword is a hypocrite. Lu Chang'an shook his head. Selling character isn't as bad as you said, right? Bai Hui said uncertainly. Character, if it is used in literary works, is actually a relatively shallow concept. Neither readers nor authors should stick to the so-called character. Only focus on character, but not on the accompanying characters. The process of changing people's hearts as the plot and various circumstances change is too rude and vulgar. Lu Chang'an frowned. Character is a relatively fixed concept, but people's hearts change. A vivid character image must have vivid emotions. The human heart, rather than relying on the so-called personality described in a relatively simple way at the beginning. You're going too far. I just mean that you don't look like the cold school bully anymore. Bai Hui knew that Lu Chang'an was rambling again. When I fight next time, you will think that my character has not changed again. Why are you fighting? Maybe someone wants to die. There's a claw machine there, Bai Hui discovered. Lu Chang'an and Bai Hui walked over, and a familiar waitress came out. Brother, there is a newly opened store in front of you. Now the opening reward is 100 coins for 51 yuan, the young lady quickly and sincerely expressed her willingness to promote business to competitors. How did you know we were going to catch the doll? Bai Hui asked strangely. The young lady laughed and said nothing. Lu Chang'an nodded, took a handful of bacon, and walked towards the newly opened store. Please give me Moon Piao, Zixi translation, to pass the time. CL Scepter mascara is really not as versatile as its carrot diced lipstick. This sentence can be interpreted as, for example, Laoganma's hot sauce is good, but its sweatshirts are not so good. There must be readers out there who understand how lipstick can be used to apply eyelashes, so let me explain. I'm really immortal. Author, Chulian Kui Kan Ru Xiahua. Chapter 514. Lu Chang'an exchanged 100 coins, thinking that Bai Hui didn't really want to grab all the dolls in the doll machine in his new store, so 100 coins would be more than enough. During the opening stage, 51 yuan can be exchanged for 100 coins, and you only need 1 coin at a time. After the opening event, it will be adjusted to 2 coins at a time. There are quite a lot of people in the store now. After all, even on a commercial street where the main customer base is students, such consumption is considered very low. Surprisingly, there were no vacant claw machines for the time being, and there were people in front of each one. Lu Chang'an first looked at others and observed the claws in the machine. Bai Hui took out a mirrorless camera from his bag, Sony's A7S II. Although it is said to be a mirrorless camera, it is actually not small in size. Mirrorless lenses do not have any size advantage over SLR lenses. Good lenses are just as big and thick as a mirrorless camera. Is there any folding space in your bag? Lu Chang'an expressed doubts. It was a small bag, but it actually contains such a camera and lens, as well as some other things. Yes, if you put your head in, you can see a black hole. Bai Hui opened the bag a little and motioned for him to put his head in. Of course Lu Chang'an couldn't be so stupid. Bai Hui just opened the bag and then quickly closed it again. I think I saw something amazing. Lu Chang'an didn't see the black hole, but he saw a single condom. What? Bai Hui was confused. It's okay. Although you are a fairy, you are also an adult woman. It is only natural to have these things in your bag. Lu Chang'an expressed understanding. Seeing Lu Chang'an's expression, Bai Hui rummaged through her bag in confusion, then blushed. Lu Chang'an turned around and looked for the unoccupied claw machine as if nothing had happened. "This is a pack of spicy strips." Bai Hui turned it out and quickly ran to Lu Chang'an to show it to him. Can't he have some trust in her? He actually immediately identified it as that thing. It's really spicy strips. Lu Chang'an didn't care whether it was spicy strips or condoms. He had seen some brands not making good products and resorting to vulgar marketing methods. "Zhao, you bought it and gave me a pack." Bai Hui glared at Lu Chang'an angrily. "Where do you think you are going? Will I bring something like that with me?" "Stop holding it up," Lu Chang'an reminded her. Bai Hui looked around and then realized what she was doing. Her fair face was stained with pink color and she hurriedly stuffed it back. At a glance, it looked like a girl inviting a boy. "I brought this." Lu Chang'an was fine. Bai Hui was a girl with a tender face. She quickly moved her angle and hid behind Lu Chang'an. She lowered her head and rummaged through her bag to cover it up. Lu Chang'an walked away, and Bai Hui hurriedly grabbed the back of his clothes to follow him. "Why did you bring a camera out?" Lu Chang'an started to catch the doll. "This is a set of machines specially suitable for shooting videos, but it is also very powerful for low-light shooting, and it is not as bulky as last time." Bai Hui held the camera and whispered, "I want to capture some ugly photos for you. I look very comfortable at first glance. That's because I have no blind spots in 360 degrees, which is why I have this effect. You can't take ugly photos." Lu Chang'an didn't care. "Even if I have crooked eyebrows, if you squint your eyes, you will find it pleasing to the eye." Why are you so narcissistic?" Bai Hui looked at that familiar face very convinced, and then took a random photo and took a look. Lu Chang'an in the photo. Bai Hui didn't say anything. She raised the camera and blocked her eyes with the viewfinder. She looked at him through the many overlapping lenses in the lens. There was only room for him in such a small viewfinder. The eye-tracking focus function was turned on. Locking his eyes, Bai Hui pressed the shutter again and again. Many non-professional photographers don't like their boyfriends or girlfriends being photographed by other photographers, because the feeling of looking at each other through the lens is always very ambiguous. Many people say that photographers and models are flirting through the lens, so that they can capture the most natural and touching feeling, especially in the field of portraiture and private photography. While taking pictures, there are many examples of male photographers turning the subjects into girlfriends. Bai Hui knows that in many low girls or cousers' private photos or productions, the photographer is her boyfriend. Bai Hui doesn't have such a photography boyfriend. She prefers to take pictures of herself, so she bought 2 sets of cameras and lenses because she thinks it's more natural. If she really wants to find someone to take pictures of herself alone, she always feels a little reluctant. Lu Chang'an has no pressure at all when facing the camera. He feels so natural and relaxed. He occasionally looks at the camera while catching the doll. They were looking at each other through the camera. Lu Chang'an couldn't see Bai Hui's expression, let alone the softness in her eyes. Lu Chang'an knows how to use a camera, so he probably won't be his own photographer, but it seems good to hide behind the camera and take pictures of him. "Stop shooting. I'm going to teach you some tricks on catching dolls. You can catch them yourself in the future." Lu Chang'an waved to Bai Hui to come over. Bai Hui turned off the camera, walked over, looked serious, and listened to his understanding of the claw machine and the tips he summarized. Bai Hui didn't want to catch many. Lu Chang'an helped her catch 23, and she stopped after catching 2. Bai Hui used the remaining game coins to play on the dance machine. Lu Chang'an was always interested in digital products that embodies the charm of technology. He played with Bai Hui's digital camera. Bai Hui said that the memory card was full and gave him a new one. Zhang Xins. While Bai Hui was playing on the dance machine, Lu Chang'an took a few test shots with his camera. The actual use of a mirrorless camera is similar to that of a SLR. Of course, there are some differences, such as the electronic viewfinder. After Bai Hui finished dancing, he looked at the photos and deleted them in a hurry. He glared at Lu Chang'an. This guy stood close at his height and took a wide-angle shot. Bai Hui in the photo looked like a kindergarten kid. At first glance, I thought it was Zhou Dongdong who was photographed. He is short and round. Ha ha ha, it seems that you are not 360-degree blind. Lu Chang'an stretched out his hand and then retracted it. She is already short enough, so he shouldn't pat her on the head. Bai Hui was furious. When the club recruited new members that day, he could clearly see that she was a long-legged girl even from a high place. Come here, Bai Hui picked up a large bag of dolls and walked to a secluded corner. Lu Chang'an stood still and did not move. Bai Hui waved again. Lu Chang'an looked at her doubtfully and walked over. Stop blowing into my nose, lest I sneeze again and waste saliva. Bai Hui didn't care about these bastard words with him anymore. Also, don't lift up your skirt to measure the length of your legs. I measured it last time. Lu Chang'an still remembered that even for a girl with an average figure like Bai Fen, the scene of lifting up her skirt to measure the length of her legs would make people uncomfortable. Remember, after all, people are so brave. Remembering the scene at that time is also a kind of respect. Look here, Bai Hui pointed to her chest, her cheeks flushed. It's just clothes. Lu Chang'an looked at mountains as mountains and water as water. Even if I am not 360 degrees perfect, but I am 360 degrees perfect, Bai Hui must let him understand this. The key is not that a person can really be 360 degrees perfect. But a part of perfection is enough. You say it's perfect, so be it. Lu Chang'an didn't want to comment. You don't believe it. Bai Hui felt that Lu Chang'an's attitude was too perfunctory. I didn't say I didn't believe it. I can't be like last time. Last time I lifted my skirt, I went crazy. I don't know how to lift my t-shirt and underwear, Bai Hui said depressedly, a bit like telling Lu Chang'an, but also a bit like remind yourself not to be too impulsive. I finally have some brains. Lu Chang'an was pleased. Anyway, you have to admit that I'm not as useless as you said. Bai Hui was still very depressed. She couldn't prove it directly, but she cared about it and wanted to prove it. Lu Chang'an sighed. Why are you sighing? Bai Hui looked at Lu Chang'an suspiciously. You're the one I'm talking about with big breasts and no brains. Bai Hui didn't mind this comment. He said she had big breasts. If you are good for nothing, how can you be qualified to be my friend? Lu Chang'an laughed. Forget it, don't expect Bai Hui's brain to see through the phenomenon to the essence. Yes, Bai Hui showed a slightly shy smile. This seemed to be the first time Lu Chang'an directly expressed that he liked her. Going back, Lu Chang'an waved his hand and walked outside. Bai Hui quickly followed him. She wanted to follow him to the intersection of the street and then separate. Lu Chang'an fulfilled Bai Hui's wish and walked from the street to the bridge. He saw a spider setting up a web between the stone piers and the railings, thread by thread. This spider is also stupid and works hard to build a web. If there is a strong wind or a drop of rain in this place, its web will be broken into pieces. This silk and net still have to be found in a suitable place to set up. Or maybe it has its own ability, and when it gets entangled, it can't be beaten or blown apart by wind or rain. Lu Chang'an looked at the spider that was still working hard to build a web, and stretched out his fingers to rest on the web. The spider seemed to feel some original attraction, gave up building the web, and crawled on Lu Chang'an's fingers. Lu Chang'an walked across the bridge and passed by the small commodity market. He stretched out his finger under the electric meter of an awning. The spider climbed up and started to build a web inside the awning again. When I returned to the community, I didn't see Shang Guandandan playing cards under the grapevine trellis. The weather was not suitable for playing cards outdoors. It would be more comfortable to find a poker friend's home and sit by the fire to kill time. Lu Chang'an only saw Zhou Dongdong lying with her head up under the sycamore tree, holding Shang Guandandan's mobile phone in her hand, looking at the screen as if she was in a dream. When Lu Chang'an walked over, he saw a line of drool dripping from the corner of her mouth, almost it was dripping from her chin, and she glanced at the screen. What she was watching was eating broadcast. There was a large basin of seafood in front of a person, who was eating his. Joe Dong Dong was also fascinated by it. It's the last day for double monthly passes, today one is worth two. I recommend a book, The Happy Man of the Haytake Family of Konoha. If I hit E fast enough, what about my teammates? You can't catch up with me. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I'm really immortal. Author, Chulian Kuiken Ru Xiahua. Chapter 515. Lu Chang'an took a tissue and wiped Zhou Dongdong's saliva clean. She was not disturbed. This made Lu Chang'an discover that she could enter the barrier by watching others eat. Lu Chang'an went to make a fire, and did not ask the fire-burning activists to participate. He planned to cook a meal of firewood, wild boar blood meatballs, and chicken in the evening. Any chicken you buy in the vegetable market today will have a fishy smell instead of a fresh taste if it is not covered with enough seasoning. The smoky aroma of wild boar blood meatballs, a cured meat product, can effectively remove the fishy smell and enhance the taste. Thinly sliced pork belly is also essential. During the stir-frying process, add whole slices of garlic and green onions to absorb the soup, so that the whole dish will not be sticky and the 5 flavors will be distinct. The fire was burning, and Zhou Dongdong had finished watching the eating broadcast. She saw Lu Chang'an lighting the fire, and hurriedly ran over and occupied the position in front of the big stove, showing that she was still an active member of the fire-burning group. Brother Chang'an, I just ate a lot of delicious food, Zhou Dongdong burped and said with satisfaction. You were just watching other people eat delicious food. Lu Chang'an reminded her to face reality positively and correctly, and not to fall into fantasy and be unable to extricate herself. I obviously think I'm eating delicious food, Zhou Dongdong thought for a moment in confusion. No, that was what others ate, you were just watching. Lu Chang'an stretched out his finger and poked her stomach. At the same time, he also understood that it turned out that she did not enter the barrier because of watching others eat, but because she herself I entered the barrier thinking I was eating. Zhou Dongdong lowered his head, looked at his belly, touched it again, and was surprised. His belly was not round at all. Could it be that he hadn't eaten anything? Zhou Dongdong was very sad. She had already realized her dream of happiness. Why did Brother Chang'an want to destroy her happiness? Lu Chang'an laughed and pointed at the stove, light the fire. Zhou Dongdong was so bored that he forgot to light the fire. Besides eating, what else do you do? Lu Chang'an shook his head. In addition to eating, I also eat and eat. Incredible. I have to work harder. You should be as good at learning as eating. Lu Chang'an felt that at that level, Zhou Dongdong could be compared with Gao Duai. How can there be children who are good at studying and eating? The child in our class who is the best at studying is not as good at eating as I am. I am the child who is the best at eating. Everyone is good at it. Zhou Dongdong thinks that eating is good and being good at learning is equally important, but being good at eating may be more important, but Zhou Dongdong wouldn't say that because she is already a child who knows a little bit of humility. I don't want to talk to you anymore. Why? It makes me stupid to talk to you. It doesn't matter if you are stupid. If there are smart children everywhere and everyone wants to be first in the exam, then who will be the last? You, I know it's you, it must be you. Lu Chang'an pointed to the sycamore tree, go and stand there and stop talking to me. Lu Chang'an must maintain his IQ. Zhou Dongdong threw a big wooden stick into the stove and ran to stand under the sycamore tree. After standing there honestly for a minute, Zhou Dongdong moved back a little bit. He found that Brother Chang'an had no intention of letting him continue to stand, so he squatted down and rested his head on his knees to look at him. Make a fire. Lu Chang'an picked out the big wooden stick that Zhou Dongdong had thrown in, split it open with one palm, and then burned it. When the food was just ready, Shang Guandandan just opened the door of the utility room and walked out. Zhou Dongdong was serving rice, and Shang Guandandan took a bowl, held it in both hands, placed it carefully in front of Lu Chang'an, and aligned Lu Chang'an's chopsticks. It's time to do housework again, Dandan is so hard-working. Naturally, he sat down around the wood-fired stove to cook food. Lu Chang'an still took a wet towel and put it on the edge of the pot in front of Zhou Dongdong. This kid was too involved in eating and would be thrown by the pot if he was not careful. Burning is also common. Lu Chang'an continued to eat, and had no intention of spreading a piece of food in front of Shang Guandandan. Shang Guandandan was stunned for a moment while holding the bowl. She obviously helped with the housework, why didn't he give her the same treatment? So Shang Guandandan went back and took out her thermos pot and placed it next to the stove. Lu Chang'an ignored her. These waxed wild boar blood meatballs were so delicious. They were lightly boiled with water before being put into the pot. The flavor of the chicken juice was incorporated into them. They were salty, spicy, and delicious, making them an appetizing addition to rice. Shang Guandandan was angry for a minute, but because the food was so delicious, he lost his anger, especially the wild boar blood meatballs. Shang Guandandan bit into a big piece in one bite. After dinner, Shang Guandandan was about to go back to the room with the thermos in his arms, so he said to Lu Chang'an, "I'll watch TV for a while first, and I'll come out later to help you wash the dishes." "Where do you have TV to watch?" Lu Chang'an was confused. "When we were playing cards in the morning, I said I couldn't watch the TV. Xiao Qian said he could do it." He secretly saw the internet password at Xiao Qian's house and remembered it all the time. He connected the TV to the internet for me and I could watch it. TV Shang Guandandan said with great gratitude. Although Xiao Qian, a little old man, tried to win Shang Guandandan's thermos bottle, Shang Guandandan had already forgiven him. "This nosy old man," Lu Chang'an nodded. "Then he came to get you a TV. When he saw your coffin, he didn't say anything." It turned out that Lu Chang'an had been hiding the coffin so that no one else could see it. Zhou Dongdong used to see him throwing his little mother away. Chicken had peeked into the compartment of the armored transport vehicle. He asked why there was such a big coffin. "I said you got it, and he didn't say anything." "Why didn't he say anything when you said I got it?" "Because he thinks you are a strange person, so there is nothing strange about you," Shang Guandandan explained. Lu Chang'an said oh and said nothing more. Lu Chang'an went to play mahjong in the evening and won old man Qian 30 yuan. He was so angry that he jumped, but Lu Chang'an went back calmly. Just as he walked downstairs, Shang Guandandan came out, looked around and frowned slightly. "Didn't I say I would come out later to help you wash the dishes? Why have you finished washing them all?" Lu Chang'an calmly took out a basket of bowls from the stove and placed them in front of Shang Guandandan. "Wash it? He is hiding here, waiting for her." Shang Guandandan took 2 steps back and looked at Lu Chang'an in disbelief. How could he do this to her? "I'm tired. I need to rest today." Shang Guandandan nodded. "You'd better wash yourself." After saying that, she closed the door and went back. Lu Chang'an found that even if he was resourceful, there was really nothing he could do when he encountered someone who would not even do the housework for the sake of laziness and even the dignity of the Queen Mother. Lu Chang'an took a long breath and decided not to try to transform this old feudal remnant royal family member into an ordinary working people. After all, this is no longer the most glorious era of nationwide construction and national labor. Everyone's ideas have changed too much. Some people even think that Shang Guandandan, who clearly doesn't like to work and only likes to pretend to do his best, is cute. It's incredible. After washing the dishes, Lu Chang'an looked up at the gray sky and felt the humidity in the air. He was afraid it would rain tomorrow. If it rains, it will be colder tomorrow, but it will probably not cool down the hot bodies of the girls participating in the comic exhibition. They will still show off their young bodies as freely as today. Of course Lu Chang'an doesn't plan to go tomorrow. The main reason for him today is to cheer up his old classmates. Just as he was thinking about going to Wang Jiang's store tomorrow, Lu Chang'an received a call from Sunangziu. Qin Yinan is pregnant. Sunangziu's tone was very calm. Please give me a monthly recommendation vote, and recommend a book. Yu Shen by the way. Spiritual energy revived. Hong Xiaofu awakened, and what he awakened was actually luck. This is awesome. I'm really immortal. Author, Chu Lian Kui Kan Ru Xiahua. Chapter 516. Lu Chang'an heard clearly that Sunangziu said that Qin Yinan was pregnant. Like every elder brother, Lu Chang'an asked calmly, who is the father of the child? I want to beat him to death. Sunangziu knew that Lu Chang'an was definitely not a normal person, and he would not be shocked when he heard any news. However, he still had time to joke. Sunangziu was already very depressed and coldly did not reply. Where is the person? There was no reply, not even a breath, and Lu Chang'an hung up the phone. Lu Chang'an called Qin Yinan. I knew you couldn't be indifferent to this matter. It was Sunangziu who answered the phone. It is indeed impossible for Lu Chang'an to ignore Qin Yinan's cell phone now, which is very unusual. Although Qin Yinan and Sunangziu are not said to be life and death enemies, they are not peaceful enough to allow the other party to pick him up. The extent of the call. Lu Chang'an said nothing, just waiting for Sunangziu to continue. I came to Qin Yinan about something and chatted for a while, but she fainted. Sunangziu said calmly, if possible, she didn't want this to happen. She even hoped that Lu Chang'an wouldn't know. It's just that the fire can't be contained in the paper, and Lu Chang'an is not the kind of person who hides things easily. Although she also knew that if she didn't say anything, she could still hide it for a long time, but it didn't make much sense. For a life like hers, there is not much difference between concealing the previous year and 10 years. How is she doing now? Lu Chang'an asked. Fainted again? It seems that this is not a situation that occurs occasionally. Lu Chang'an remembered that Qin Yinan fainted last time when he and An Nuan took a bath together. It's just that Qin Yinan's dizziness was accompanied by many other symptoms. I don't know if it will appear the same this time. Asleep? I'll come over and take a look. Underground base. Sunangziu didn't like to be long-winded. After telling her the location, she hung up the phone. After all, this was not something that was very beneficial to her. One of the reasons why she did not hide anything from Lu Chang'an or do anything was that Qin Yinan's symptoms could prove some of her research and theories, and also be practical evidence to support some of the things she had mentioned to Lu Chang'an. Lu Chang'an walked downstairs and was about to leave the community when he found that the door of the utility room opened a gap as wide as a finger, and there were two eyes moving up and down in the gap. Aren't you tired and want to rest? Lu Chang'an asked in passing. I'm not tired anymore. Lu Chang'an nodded, said nothing, and walked out. Shang Guandandan chased out and followed Lu Chang'an. What are you going to do? I'm going to see Qin Yinan. I'm going. Lu Chang'an ignored her and let her follow him. After passing the vegetable market, Shang Guandandan grabbed Lu Chang'an's finger and stood there motionless. Lu Chang'an just looked at her. This was the dividing point for Shang Guandandan's daily wanderings. She would go as far as here. She and Zhou Dongdong bought several loaches here and they are still raising them in the pit. She believes that knowing the location of the vegetable market means that she is prepared in the field of housework, and the word mother is often associated with the vegetable market and has a special meaning. She had never been further afield. How far is it? Shang Guandandan asked tiredly, looking down at the toes exposed under his skirt. It's far away, at the bottom of that mountain. Lu Chang'an pointed to the signal light of the antenna tower on the top of Lushan Mountain under the night cover in the distance. Shang Guandandan stretched out two fingers to measure the distance, then raised his hands to wrap his arms around Lu Chang'an's neck, trying to climb up to him. To go this far, the Queen Mother could not do it even if she tried her best. "Do you think I'm your pony?" Lu Chang'an lifted her off him and put her aside. "That's a fruit horse. It's a very short horse anyway. I can't walk that far, you carry me." Shang Guandandan came over again, and then climbed on him. This is something Zhou Dongdong often does, and Shang Guandandan also wants to do it. "Then you go back and watch TV. If I didn't come out before, you had to carry me out," Shang Guandandan muttered quietly, holding up the skirt and walking back little by little. Anyway, if he didn't hold me, how could Shang Guandandan walk such a long way? It will take a long time for her to learn how to take a taxi or take the subway. "Let's go, I'll carry you." Lu Chang'an sighed softly, thinking that the cause of Qinyan's possible physical problems today needs to be studied, and maybe it would be useful to bring Shang Guandandan with him. Shang Guandandan ran back with his skirt, jumped on Lu Chang'an's back and hugged his neck tightly. Lu Chang'an put one hand behind his back to support her. In fact, he wanted to hold her under his arm, just like Zhou Dongdong. Shang Guandandan lay on his back, swinging his feet back and forth. The child finally treated him a little better. It seemed that he still had a trace of pity for her in his heart. This scene was what Shang Guandandan felt at ease with. Looking forward to it, Shang Guandandan reached out and touched his hair. Lu Chang'an ignored her, just thinking about Qinyan's pregnancy, and accelerated all the way to Hunan University. The underground base is naturally under Sun Nangxiu's glass house at Hunan University. Last time Lu Chang'an was invited to visit some facilities in the underground base, including those Gal game robots. Sun Nangxiu would not build such a secret base specifically for those robots. What he saw was undoubtedly only a small part of it. Sun Nangxiu took Qinyan there and explained that there should be certain medical facilities, biological experiments, and testing equipment there. When he reached the glass house, Lu Chang'an still circled around and came to the location where he last saw the truck sinking into the garage. There were only a few dim LED lights on in the house. Those lights simulated the effect of sunlight. It was difficult to tell whether they were real or fake with the naked eye. But against the backdrop of the silence and darkness of the outside world, they looked a bit weird, even more so than a certain person. The scary will-o'-the-wisp I saw in the wild some time ago. The sensor door opened, and the blonde robot that Lu Chang'an had seen came out, making a sound reminiscent of virtual idols such as Hatsune Miku, and said to Lu Chang'an, "Great blood ancestor, welcome." This blonde robot was exactly the same as the one whose head was broken by Lu Yuang, but thinking of the Gal game robots displayed underground by Sun Nangxiu, Lu Chang'an did not think that the robot in front of him must be the one he had seen before. As for the great blood ancestor, Lu Chang'an did not think of any other myths and legends, but the great blood ancestor was also mentioned in the conversation between the robot and Professor Crick that he heard in the cave in Gongjiaja. Those robots should still be under the control of Mrs. Karnstein at that time, right? Lu Chang'an didn't pay attention, because he had already heard from Professor Crick's words that the learning ability of these blonde robots may far exceed those of Gal game robots. They often search for various information on the internet, use built-in chip analysis and summarizing some new information. It can be regarded as a relatively top-level artificial intelligence, but sometimes it behaves like an artificial retard. Great blood ancestor, is the sleeping princess your young wife or young lady? The blonde robot led the way while paying attention to Shang Guandandan, who was being carried on Lu Chang'an's back. Shang Guandandan had already fallen asleep, lying on a warm and generous back, relaxing his breathing rhythm as he walked, making it easy to fall asleep. She is another blood ancestor. Is there any point in communicating with the robot? Lu Chang'an didn't know, but he didn't discriminate against these artificial intelligences. After all, humans regarded robots as aliens, but they couldn't be sure that they were not born from a similar cause. But he didn't mind teasing the blonde robot either. According to the information I collected, it does not show that there is only one blood ancestor in this world. So it is possible that she is another blood ancestor. I have to update my information, the great blood ancestor, I think there is another blood ancestor. The blood ancestor is Rasputin, who once lived in Russia, the blonde robot said loudly, seeming to be very interested in discussing this topic with Lu Chang'an. Oh? Can you tell me about the information you collected about Rasputin? Lu Chang'an found it interesting. He felt that he was quite comfortable talking to the blonde robot. The exaggerated and casual tone of the blonde robot could easily make people feel uncomfortable. He was chatting with creatures like Zhou Dongdong and Zhu Huntang. Lu Chang'an instantly felt sorry for Zhou Dongdong and Zhu Huntang. At least these two children would not speak so rudely. No wonder Professor Crick didn't speak with much patience or good nature to the robot he was with. The blonde robot looked back at Lu Chang'an. Lu Chang'an reached out and turned its head away. If it hadn't been needed to lead the way, Lu Chang'an would have broken its neck. He does not discriminate against humans, but breaking a human's neck is not inconsistent with this, so it is normal to have the urge to break a robot's neck. I really envy humans, I wanted to. The blonde robot did not feel Lu Chang'an's impulse. After all, even humans themselves sometimes have trouble accurately sensing their own emotions, let alone robots. Lu Chang'an had lost interest in talking to it, even if he might be able to get some secret information about Rasputin from it. After all, the person who took away the remains of Rasputin for research was the Tesla Biological and Medical Research Center, which is now controlled by Sunangziu. Along the way, the blonde robot kept muttering about various nonsense topics to talk to Lu Chang'an, but Lu Chang'an just listened to it silently and stopped talking to it. Finally, taking the super long elevator deep underground, the blonde robot no longer followed Lu Chang'an. The person standing in the corridor outside the elevator exit to greet Lu Chang'an and Shang Guandandan was already Sunangziu. Why did you bring her here? Sunangziu's pretty body took 2 steps back, her skirt swaying, and her shadow on the ground was like a flowing lake. Every time he suddenly meets this beautiful girl at close range, it takes some time for Sunangziu to adapt to the sense of oppression she brings. Even though she was lying on Lu Chang'an's back and seemed to be asleep. Sometimes when adults go out, children always want to follow. Lu Chang'an put Shang Guandandan down. Shang Guandandan's feet stomped on the ground, and Lu Chang'an helped her wake up. Shang Guandandan's eyelashes trembled, he raised his hand to wipe his eyes in a daze, then raised his hand and closed his eyes to crawl on Lu Chang'an. "We're here," Lu Chang'an said. Only then did Shang Guandandan try to open his eyes, and saw Sunangziu in front of him, and said hello sleepily, "Oh bitch. You, what did you call me?" Although Shang Guandandan's aura was oppressive, Sunangziu was not a timid person and could not help but glare at Shang Guandandan. "How dare you point at my mother-in-law?" Shang Guandandan regained consciousness and glared at Sunangziu majestically. Lu Chang'an patted Shang Guandandan's face to signal her to wake up more, and then said to Sunangziu, "Where is Qinyanan?" Sunangziu resisted the urge to argue with Shang Guandandan, pointed forward, and motioned for Lu Chang'an to follow. "Why do you say she is pregnant? As far as I know, she does not have a boyfriend, let alone a secret lover." Even in Sunangziu's mysterious base, there are technological levels everywhere that cannot be inferred by common sense. But Lu Chang'an also had to use common sense to consider the problem. After all, Qinyanan's physiological indicators that were different from ordinary people belonged to evolution rather than degeneration. The more complex the creature, the more complicated the reproduction process. Qinyanan is not a spore plant, let alone a slime mold. Can she still reproduce by herself? There are indeed people in this world who have both male and female reproductive organs, but I have never heard of such people being able to get pregnant on their own. What's more, Qinyanan is not like this, she is a normal woman. Today there is another silver alliance. I would like to thank my old man for his coordination and encouragement. I would like to thank you all for your hard work. I would like to thank everyone in the book club for your help. It will start to explode tomorrow. New extras will be released as soon as possible. You can leave a message for any extras you want to see. There is no guarantee. Meet all extra requirements and try your best. I'm really immortal. Author, Chulian Kuikan Rusiahua. Chapter 517. Sunangzio just looked at Lu Chang'an. It seemed that he had great confidence in Qin Yanan and thought that it was impossible for Qin Yanan to go behind his back to find another man. Is this the mentality a simple brother should have? The things that happened back then finally affected his mentality. After all, men are extremely possessive creatures. Even if you can't get it, or even if you don't want it, it's best if others don't get it either. That's it? What if Qin Yanan has a secret lover or boyfriend? Sunangzio asked. This is probably a very complicated thing, and it may be a bit uncomfortable, but if the two are mutually supportive and she is willing to do so, that's fine. Lu Chang'an didn't think about it in detail, but he just thought that it should be such a mentality. Sushi wrote Shui Tiao Getou in 1076 ad. At this time, Qin Cao was only 2 years old. When Qin Cao was 13, her family fell into decline and she became an official prostitute. She performed as an artist but not as a prostitute. She became very popular. Then she met Sushi. Sunangzio said coldly. She is familiar with poetry, and naturally knows about men's romance and emotions. Only in poetry, the writing and singing are beautiful, but when exposed, it is the woman's resentment, sorrow, suffering and the burial of a lifetime. She knew that Lu Chang'an liked to read some poems and songs, so such a man probably had the same virtues as the literary talents of the past dynasties. I know this, but what does this have to do with Qin Yanan's pregnancy? Lu Chang'an looked at Sunangzio calmly. At this time, Sunangzio could no longer suppress his resentment. Between her eyebrows, between her lips and teeth, and in her tone of voice, it all came out. There was no doubt that Sunangzio had many complicated emotions about Qin Yanan's pregnancy. Sushi and Qin Cao naturally cannot have a pure relationship between men and women. Qin Cao has her own heart. How could an old romantic like Sushi let her go? It's just that Sushi is particularly despicable. He and Qin Cao were traveling in the West Lake, and Qin Cao asked him, "What is a scene?" He said that his skirt dragged 6 pictures of the Xiaoxiang River, and his bun held up a section of clouds in Wushan. Qin Cao asked, "What is the right person?" He said that he would follow him, Yang Sushi, and turtles would kill Bao and join the army. Qin Cao asked, "How is this going?" He said, "In front of the door." The boss is married to a businessman. Sunangzio sneered again, but did not look at Lu Chang'an. She was not mocking Lu Chang'an, at least Lu Chang'an would not do such a thing. After hearing what Sushi said, Qin Cao gave up and became a nun. Lu Chang'an naturally knew the story. After Qin Cao became a nun, Sushi often came to see her, but she already knew that it was completely impossible. They got married in the world of mortals and died 8 years later. Sushi is like this. What he means is that he can't marry Qin Cao. He wants to maintain his own personality and reputation. But he also doesn't want Qin Cao to marry someone else. He warns Qin Cao that even if he marries someone, he will only marry someone else. She could only marry a layman, but she couldn't compare to a romantic and talented man like him. Qin Cao did as he wanted, became a nun, and never married again. Sushi felt relieved and could take monks and friends to see her for meditation. So elegant, without any tackiness. Sunangzio then turned back to look at Lu Chang'an, and at this point, he should understand what she meant. You mean, men's thoughts about women are often that even if they can't legitimately own her, they don't want her to belong to others. Lu Chang'an nodded. Sushi did go too far, and it is indeed common for men. Psychological, personality, you can't pick it up, people's hearts, You can't look closely at it. You dare to say that you don't have such thoughts about Qinyanan. Sunangzio became even more angry, but there is no way you can let Qinyanan end up like Qin Cao. What Sunangzio was angry about was that Lu Chang'an would not let Qinyanan become a nun and cut off the relationship between the two. So you first imagine that I will do something that you cannot tolerate, and then use this as a basis to get angry with me. Lu Chang'an pointed to his chest. You set a target on me and hit it yourself, isn't it too much? I've always been like this, do you know? Sunangzio glared at Lu Chang'an fiercely. While your beloved sister is in my hands, you can't compete with me. How can I not take the opportunity to treat you as a target? Okay, Lu Chang'an motioned for her to continue. Sunangzio didn't want to say anything. What she actually wanted to know was whether Lu Chang'an had the same thoughts towards her. If she asked him directly, he would definitely not give her a satisfactory answer, and Sunangzio didn't want to ask directly. For women, venting their emotions is the most important thing. Whether it can solve the problem is not the point. Qinyanan is pregnant. This is a big deal. Lu Chang'an and Sunangzio turned back to look at Shang Guandandan. She seemed to have finally determined what had happened. She worked hard to brew up the appropriate emotion and looked at Lu Chang'an with relief. I think you are very happy. After all, Qinyanan is so good at flattering. Sunangzio looked at Shang Guandandan expressionlessly, remembering Qinyanan's previous behavior towards Shang Guandandan. From today on, Lu Chang'an and Shang Guandandan from a personal perspective, Qinyanan really pleased the right person. It was obvious that Shang Guandandan had a certain influence on Lu Chang'an, otherwise Lu Chang'an would not keep her with him at this time. It's useless to be jealous of others because you're not up to par. Last time I asked you to discuss the ways of husband and wife, it seems you didn't have much understanding. Shang Guandandan frowned in disappointment and glanced at Sunangzio, then moved away. Eyes. Sunangzio lowered her head and looked at her belly, and then at Lu Chang'an, a little old woman who had been buried in the soil for who knows how many years. How could she understand that modern science had already proven that this lack of pregnancy was due to the woman's belly alone? If this man doesn't work hard, what can she do? Don't put the blame on him. I already knew that you absorbed an unknown amount of his essence and blood, far more than Qinyanan. But Qinyanan is pregnant, but you are not. Isn't that your problem? Shang Guandandan had been staring at Sunangzio. How could the little movements between Sunangzio's eyebrows and the thoughts revealed by Sunangzio be hidden from the queen mother who had lived in the harem for many years? I have the feeling of a modern daughter-in-law meeting a mother-in-law who is a combination of the dregs of feudal superstition and tradition. Sunangzio didn't want to argue with Shang Guandandan. She felt like a scholar meeting a soldier, who couldn't explain why. She really couldn't bear the feeling that Shang Guandandan revealed from time to time of the natural oppression of lower creatures by superior beings, but this mother-in-law who looked 15 or 16 years old but actually didn't know how old she was majoring in biology and medicine. How can she compare to her level? Don't treat everyone as your daughter-in-law, Lu Chang'an reminded Shang Guandandan. If you talk nonsense again, I will deduct your pocket money. Shang Guandandan suddenly became nervous. Sunangzio secretly rolled her eyes at Shang Guandandan. Sure enough, as Lu Chang'an said, the child was following the adults out to play, but Lu Chang'an was able to suppress it with pocket money. Sunangzio opened a door and continued walking forward. She noticed that Shang Guandandan was holding Lu Chang'an's finger like a follower. These were the habits of children. Coming to a lounge, the three of them walked in. Qinyanan was lying on a white bed, surrounded by various instruments. There was even a larger laboratory behind a transparent wall. Various instruments, materials, computer equipment, and robots are displayed inside. Qinyanan had woken up at this time, and when she saw Lu Chang'an, there was a complex light flowing in her eyes, and a pink halo appeared on her delicate and fair cheeks. She hasn't woken up when I informed you, but you guys came a little slow, so I already told her. Sunangzio casually picked up the white coat hanging aside and put it on. This white coat with a familiar style gave Sunangzio a more down-to-earth feeling, relatively speaking. Lu Chang'an and Shang Guandandan came over, of course, not too fast, because pregnancy is not an emergency, and they are not rushing to see each other for the last time. They are not even completely convinced yet. Lu Chang'an is as unhurried as ever. Shang Guandandan walked over and shook Qin Yinan's hand happily. Qin Yinan's cheeks turned redder, because she knew what Shang Guandandan meant, but as a woman who had never been in a relationship, she was suddenly told that she was pregnant. It was unbelievable and she was inevitably a little embarrassed and ashamed. It seems that your fainting last time was not accidental. Sunangzio believes that the reason may be related to your pregnancy. Do you think you are pregnant? Lu Chang'an was more concerned about the client's own feelings and thoughts. How could I be pregnant? The reason why Qin Yinan did not leave here after she woke up was because she also wanted to know her physical condition, so she agreed to cooperate with Sunangzio's examination. As for being used as an experimental subject by Sunangzio, she has nothing to worry about, because Sunangzio himself is more worthy of study, and everyone is not an ordinary human being. Sunangzio had already checked her body and insisted that Qin Yinan was indeed pregnant, but Qin Yinan did not accept Sunangzio's diagnosis so easily. Just like no matter how authoritative an expert doctor is, if he insists on saying that an old woman over 100 years old is pregnant, and the old woman has been living alone for decades, no one will believe it. She insisted on saying that I was pregnant, and even did an abdominal scan on me. She just pointed at a point and said it was the child in my belly. Qin Yinan muttered, looking a bit coquettish. After all, she could barely be considered a patient and was even classified as a pregnant woman, so it was her right to sound a bit coquettish in her tone and posture. Sunangzio showed a scanned picture to Lu Chang'an and clicked, Professor Lu Jianxi, you can see clearly, the enlarged outline of the uterus and the clearly defined gestational sac. Abdominal scanning technology is not new. Of course Lu Chang'an will see it. There are some details in this picture that are a little different from ordinary pregnant women who have just developed a gestational sac, but they can already explain some problems. Can we do another scan? Lu Chang'an glanced at Qin Yinan and then said to Sunangzio. Good. Sunangzio scanned Qin Yinan's abdomen again, and Lu Chang'an stared at the screen to see clearly that there was indeed a gestational sac. Sunangzio helped Qin Yinan clean her abdomen. Qin Yinan's cheeks were slightly red and she pulled up the quilt. Sunangzio signaled that Lu Chang'an could turn around. Where did this child come from? Lu Chang'an looked at Sunangzio and then at Qin Yinan. What do you think? Sunangzio looked at Lu Chang'an coldly. Shang Guandandan has been paying attention to that TV. Can he actually detect the baby in his belly through this thing? Shang Guandandan looked at the three people with different expressions in front of him and touched his belly. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I'm really immortal. Author, Chulian Kui Kan Ru Xiahua. Chapter 518. Having a child in your belly is a big event that can change a woman and a family. Many girls do not want to have children, and many girls are afraid of having children. There are many reasons. Afraid of pain, afraid of danger, afraid of affecting the body shape, afraid of affecting the relationship between husband and wife, and afraid of reducing the quality of life. It was an unknown life. Looking at the peers around me who were out of shape after giving birth to children, and looking at the mothers who were busy and unkempt about their children and had no time to take care of themselves, it was inevitable to feel that giving birth was a bit scary. It's just that many girls admit it when they are really pregnant, take off their favorite high heels, stop eating all kinds of spicy food they love, and carefully look at the ingredient lists on various daily necessities, worried. It affects the baby in the belly. If it gets sick or has a cold, it hurts here or feels uncomfortable there. I endure it and refuse to take a sip of medicine, just to prevent the baby's condition from being affected by any accident. Every girl who takes childbirth seriously must have a great life once. Qin Yinan found that her mentality quietly changed the moment Sunangzio said she was pregnant, although she did not completely believe it yet, out of anxiety and half-belief. If in the past, for something as private as an abdominal scan, you had to take off your pants below the groin, where would it be exposed to a few pairs of eyes? Even Lu Chang'an was there, even though his back was turned to him. It seems that for this matter, everything can be compromised, and there is no longer so much reserve and pretentiousness. There's just one really serious problem. Qin Yinan looked at Lu Chang'an and then at Sunangzio. Sunangzio looked at Lu Chang'an and then at Qin Yinan. Who is the child's father? Qin Yinan could not have given birth to a child by herself. Someone had to be the father of the child, but Qin Yinan knew very well that she had not had sex with anyone while sober. When she was unconscious, there was a suspect, and the suspect was here, but he couldn't say it out loud. After all, there was no evidence, and he didn't seem to be such a person. But if it wasn't him, could it be someone else? If it were anyone else, Qin Yinan wouldn't be able to accept it? Of course, this is just a choice to accept when there is no other way. It is better than someone else to be the father of the child. It is not that Qin Yinan hopes to have a child with him. I think there is no way for ordinary people to get Qin Yinan pregnant. Sunangzio looked at Lu Chang'an and said, I discussed this issue with you last time. Immortals, whether they are male or female, have formed reproductive isolation from ordinary humans. Why, ordinary people can't get me pregnant? Qin Yinan glanced at Lu Chang'an and quickly turned to stare at Sunangzio. Qin Yinan wanted to know how Sunangzio was feeling at this moment, but she had already decided that if her pregnancy was really confirmed, she would not provoke Sunangzio until the child was born healthy. After all, Sunangzio is an expert in the field of biology and medicine. There is no doubt about the level of such an expert who has been focusing on one or two fields of professional research for many years, and whose mind and body will not decline with age. However, only in the event of a safety accident that even Lu Chang'an cannot solve, it is possible to place hope on Sunangzio. After all, during the pregnancy, the safety of mother and child was entrusted to Sunangzio, in the hands of a person who can be called a female devil. She really deserves to be Sunangzio. Is it Miao Xiaorengzhen? I told Lu Chang'an that the fetus carrying his inheritance will absorb an excess of nutrients that ordinary people cannot afford, and requires a special gestation environment that ordinary women cannot provide. Even if an ordinary woman becomes pregnant, the growing fetus will also absorb the mother's body as a source of nutrition, causing the mother's death. Sunangzio pointed at Qin Yinan, hesitated for a moment, and then pointed at Shang Guandandan firmly. Your body, the quality is very good. What are you pointing at me for? Shang Guandandan said angrily. She was studying the TV and pressed every button. When she turned around, she found that Sunangzio was pointing at her. For Shang Guandandan, these monitors that can display images are called television sets. Sunangzio is not very willing to talk to Shang Guandandan. Shang Guandandan's focus and thinking are very strange. At this time, shouldn't Shang Guandandan care that she is also a suitable mother body? But she got angry because Sunangzio pointed at her, and pressed every button of the instrument on Sunangzio's workbench. She was a typical child with uncontrollable curiosity. It was a bit hard for Sunangzio to understand. Although she didn't like Shang Guandandan was full of vigilance, defense, and hostility towards Sunangzio from the very beginning. Sunangzio couldn't help but think that Shang Guandandan said that the most amount of things in Sunangzio's body came from. Does Shang Guandandan care about Lu Chang'an's blood and essence? That's why you're targeting Sunangzio in particular, right? Similarly, with Qin Yinan's current physical condition, ordinary men cannot impregnate her. Even if she has a relationship with an ordinary man, the life inheritance material that an ordinary man enters into her body will be rejected by her body and treated as foreign matter. If she loses it, there will be no chance to meet the superior inheritance egg hidden deep in her body. Sunangzio stretched out her hand and placed it on Qinyanan's lower abdomen through the quilt. After all you say, the meaning is that the child is mine, Lu Chang'an summed up what Sunangzio meant. But, I didn't know that I had ever been with him. Qinyanan pulled up the quilt and covered half of her face, leaving only her eyes exposed. For an unmarried woman, she was not even sure who the father of her child was. Which is also a bit too shameful. She said she didn't know, not that she never had sex with you. Sunangzio revealed Qinyanan's hidden meaning and looked at Lu Chang'an coldly. Do you have some kind of special hobby? Only women are in a complete coma, or do you do this kind of thing when you are unconscious? According to the explanation of abnormal psychology, this is a traumatic stress reaction, which generally only occurs when no science or explanation is needed. Stop, thank you. Lu Chang'an signaled Sunangzio to stop showing off her expertise. Would she not know if he had any special hobbies? She just wanted to bury him. Shang Guandandan nodded thoughtfully, then turned around and continued to press TV to avoid them noticing him. We are all involved, so let's speak frankly. Lu Chang'an sighed reluctantly. Even he had various past events that he didn't want to mention, especially since the parties involved were alive and healthy, and appeared young and beautiful in front of him. And speaking of it, it is somewhat difficult to look directly at the emotion. This happened many years ago, but for Lu Chang'an, it didn't last long. I can confirm that I have never had a relationship with Qinyanan. She is still like a sister to me. Lu Chang'an looked at Qinyanan, smiled, and gently touched her forehead along her forehead. With long hair, Qinyanan's eyes turned left and right and then retracted a little deeper into the quilt. If you insist that I am the father of the child in Qinyanan's belly, then the source of the matter is the night you plotted against us. After Lu Chang'an finished speaking, he silently looked at Sunangzio in front of him. Her seemingly delicate appearance concealed she looked deserted and unhappy, as if Su Mei came to Yes House to visit her relatives with the intention of spying on her rivals. General appearance. How many years ago was that? I'm pregnant now and have a gestational sac, Qinyanan said in disbelief. Before her body changed, she had done many physical examinations in high school, college, and after graduation. If a gestational sac has been present in the body for a long time, it is impossible to wait until now to detect it. There is nothing impossible about this. There is immortality, so what else is impossible? Sunangzio shook her head. What's more, you are not the first person to be pregnant for such a long time. Who else? Lu Chang'an had never heard of it. Do you remember Mrs. Yin? Sunangzio looked at Lu Chang'an calmly, like a wife flipping through her husband's address book and finding lovers and mistresses one after another. Mrs. Yin, Qinyanan also looked at Lu Chang'an with some curiosity. She was not as jealous as Sunangzio. Even if she had children, she was not as jealous as Sunangzio. I don't care how many women you have had in the past and in the future. Anyway, I am the principal palace. Original positioning. What about Mrs. Yin? Do you remember me? It is impossible for Lu Chang'an to remember every woman he has had a relationship with in his life, but Sunangzio clearly meant that there was a woman named Mrs. Yin who had a relationship with him and was pregnant. If this happened, Lu Chang'an would definitely remember it. After all, he had never had any descendants. In the past, when you were Li Jing, the commander-in-chief of Chintaguan, your wife, Mrs. Yin, was pregnant for 3 years and 6 months and gave birth to a fleshy ball, Neza. Lu Chang'an was stunned for a moment. Can this matter be blamed on him? When I first saw this record, I was a little angry. But after thinking that this was an example worth studying, I put aside my prejudice. After careful analysis, if your child is really going to be born, it is completely reasonable to wrap it with a protective after birth. It's possible that this meatball has the perfect reproduction characteristics of evolved organisms. Sunangzio looked at Qinyanan's belly and said, it will probably be the same when your children are born in the future. I don't want it, Qin Yinan was shocked. He gave birth to a huge meatball, and then split it open and a child popped out. Who wants to give birth to a child like this? When you see Ms Yang giving birth to a baby, just because she was pregnant for 3 years and 6 months in this myth and legend, you think it was me who did it, and you are going to be angry. Lu Chang'an looked at Sunangxiu calmly. Even if you have resentment towards me, and you are used to letting me take the blame, but now can we talk about the business? The corner of Sunangxiu's mouth curled up slightly. A man makes a woman happiest when he has no choice but to take advantage of her. Sorry, the game between IG and G2 was delayed last night, which made me unable to write. The explosion failed. I will break it today. This is the first update. There will be more tonight. I'm really immortal. Author, Chulian Kui Kan Ru Xiahua. Chapter 519. Of course, Sunangxiu had to talk business properly before calling Lu Chang'an over. Otherwise, given her temperament, she would have taken action long ago if she was placed in a wealthy family's home and she didn't want this little one to have heirs. Sunangxiu was able to suppress her dissatisfaction and take the trouble to help Qin Yinan get tested, of course because this was so rare in the history of life. You must know that Lu Chang'an has never had any heirs. This breakthrough in reproductive isolation and the uniqueness of the fetus are of very important and even epoch-making research value. Based on preliminary observations, I think the pregnancy period for this child may take more than 20 years, Sunangxiu said very conservatively. 20 years, Qin Yinan's head emerged from the quilt, his eyes widened in disbelief. Do you think I am a ginkgo tree? 20 years is just a conservative estimate. Even if it takes 50 or 60 years to bloom like moso bamboo, it's not impossible. Even if it takes 150 years to bloom like lamandi pineapple, that's nothing, Sunangxiu said in an ordinary way. Do you think that immortal species will have a short pregnancy period like ordinary people? Is that possible? Qin Yinan was stunned. This was still too subversive. Apart from her unusual physical condition, mentally she certainly did not completely habitually regard herself as an extraordinary human being. Many common sense and thinking habits were still no different from ordinary people. Lu Chang'an also looked at Qin Yinan. He once told Zhu Huntang that he only understood the first chapter of the Book of Songs and could not understand the second chapter of the Book of Songs. In fact, he still understood, but he had never truly experienced this kind of blood connection. It's just family affection. A pregnancy period of at least 20 years, this is absolutely unbearable for Qin Yinan. A 40-week pregnancy for an ordinary woman will have a great psychological impact, let alone 20 years. How will you live this life if you have to carry a pregnant belly for 20 years? Everything is unknown. After all, it is a phenomenon that has never happened before in the history of life. There is no experience or data to verify and learn from. What's more, you have not done in-depth testing now. It is too casual to draw such a long pregnancy period. Lu Chang'an did not agree with Sunangxiu's view. I think so, 20 years. Are you simply and crudely prolonging the vital signs of an immortal? Qin Yinan also disagreed. What's more, I don't think this is a pregnancy phenomenon that can be compared to humans. Over the years, none of the women I have had close contact with has ever given birth to offspring. Lu Chang'an did not accept Qin Yinan's pregnancy so simply. Caused by him, of course. He didn't suspect that Qin Yinan was looking for him to take the blame, but this unprecedented situation required careful proof. Sunangxiu's conclusion was too simple and crude. It was all based on her speculation without any experimental evidence. Lu Chang'an could not accept it hastily. All conclusions start from speculation. As long as they are well-founded, they are not just wild fantasies but scientific ideas. Sunangxiu looked at Lu Chang'an and Qin Yinan. Your thinking has fallen into inertial misunderstandings. Say it. Lu Chang'an listened attentively. You say that I simply and crudely treat the extended vital signs of ordinary people as the condition of the living. In fact, You are like this. Sunangzio paused hesitantly. Qin Yinan's pregnancy has nothing to do with the lives of ordinary men and women. The combination of inherited materials is also different. Qin Yinan touched her belly and felt nothing special. She hoped that it would be more like an ordinary person giving birth to a child, instead of becoming a novelty event or the subject of research and observation. The fetus in Qin Yinan's belly was born because of Lu Chang'an. In this sense, it is indeed your child, and you are also its parents. However, it may not carry the genetic inheritance of its parents like ordinary children. It may only carry without Qin Yinan's genes. He cannot inherit all of Lu Chang'an's physical characteristics and abilities like other children who inherit their father's genes. At this time Lu Chang'an just wants to send "excuse me, JPG. What I mean is that the substance Lu Chang'an once injected into Qin Yinan's body caused Qin Yinan's inheritance egg to develop into a gestational sac on its own." Sunangzio pointed to her laboratory and said to Lu Chang'an, "I once told you, there is a unique kind of RNA in the cells in your body, which is completely impossible for ordinary humans to exist. Only if this kind of RNA appears in this fetus, can it become a species exactly like you. From now on, we will study the primary stage of Qin Yinan's body. This RNA is absolutely undetectable when the fetus is tested." "After all, do you mean that I got myself pregnant?" Qin Yinan looked at Sunangzio in surprise. "Cultivating somatic cells into embryonic cells is nothing new. Isn't it unimaginable that an egg can independently develop into an embryo under the stimulation and promotion of certain substances? This is Lu Chang'an's ability." Sunangzio pointed at Lu Chang'an and said, "Sorry, I don't have this ability. I can only say that your imagination is rich enough." Lu Chang'an looked at Sunangzio suspiciously. Where did her theory without experimental basis come from? Where did she get such confidence? What's the point? The whole thing is actually like this. What happened between us back then, Lu Chang'an's life essence caused changes in Ye Sijin's body. I have verified that Ye Sijin was in a critical period that night, and her inheritance egg was at that time. She was stimulated and caused a mutation, and it has been dormant in her body, relying on the nutrients provided by Lu Chang'an's life essence to maintain a dormant state. Until recently, it was activated." Sunangzio explained. "That night was your safe period." This was the first time the three of them had said this to each other face to face. Although Qin Yinan did not fully understand the mood that Ye Sijin should be feeling at this moment, it did not prevent her from showing a hint of shooting a stone to hit yourself. Feet smile, a little bit of schadenfreude, it's very small, after all, it can't offend Sunangzio too much. Sunangzio's face changed slightly. She was indeed in a safe period that night, but when she had a relationship with him before, she had always deliberately avoided the dangerous period, and there had never been such a strange situation. It can only be said that Ye Sijin's little fox girl is really lucky. Just because she was born in the Ye family, she naturally got his favor. Even this change happened to her during their first intimate contact. Where is Sunangzio? How many times have you had close contact? The results of it? Why? Sunangzio often feels that it is unfair, so she likes to study biology and medicine. She always feels like changing her fate against fate. Since God is so unfair, can't she find a way to get pregnant? It's a pity that Lu Chang'an, a heartless man who doesn't care about his old relationship, has no intention of cooperating with Sunangzio in the experiment of having a child. According to your statement, this is a fetus born because of me. From a biological and genetic perspective, it is not my child." Lu Chang'an understood what Sunangzio meant and turned around to find Qin Yinan using a U. After finishing the meal, I wiped my mouth clean and planned not to admit it. He looked at him with eyes and said quickly, "This is just a scientific verification." From this stage, it is indeed the case. Sunangzio nodded. At this stage, Qin Yinan was a little confused. "I said, it may take 20 years or even longer for a child who truly belongs to the immortal. The gestational sac in Qin Yinan's belly is stimulated by Lu Chang'an's life essence and will not be born simply, It can even be said that it is still not fully activated. If there is no outside intervention, it may just stay in this state and grow extremely slowly. Sunangzio flipped through a stack of information on the workbench and said casually. External intervention. Lu Chang'an looked at Sunangzio's laboratory. Sunangzio has been working in the fields of biological science and medicine for many years. She has done both experiments that are allowed and not allowed in human society. She is indeed an expert in this regard. When he called him here, Lu Chang'an knew that Sunangzio would never simply tell him such news. She definitely had some experimental plans, but she just kept telling various reasons and explanations to pave the way for convincing Lu Chang'an and Qin Yinan to accept them. I think that for the further activation and subsequent development of this gestational sac, it needs more nutrients, which Qin Yinan himself cannot provide. To put it simply, every time Lu Chang'an has a relationship with Qin Yinan, he will prepare for the gestational sac. Providing more nutrients will allow it to develop more completely, and as the number of times you have sex increases, it will be possible for it to gain true inheritance from you, Lu Chang'an, and become a true descendant of the strongest life on earth. Sunangzio said casually. He dropped the information in his hand and made a summary without expression. Qin Yinan quickly picked up the quilt and shrank her head under the quilt. This is so ridiculous and completely unacceptable. Sunangzio, we are not guinea pigs, you are talking nonsense. Can you at least come up with some experimental evidence? Lu Chang'an admired Sunangzio's imagination very much. He had read many novels, in which the male protagonist, no matter what abilities he had, even Xiaoxian, his children were all born in 10 months of pregnancy, so Sunangzio's statement is more reasonable. But is this writing a novel? Just make a random guess and give a seemingly reasonable explanation? Without any realistic basis or experimental evidence, who would believe it? Do you think I am willing to believe this method? It is an unprecedented phenomenon. It is impossible to conduct experiments. Without inference based on experience and my academic ability, what else can be done? Sunangzio glared at Lu Chang'an. If you don't believe it, do an experiment now. Go ahead, the bed is ready for you. Do you think I'm crazy too? Lu Chang'an didn't believe the plan given by Sunangzio at all. What's the difference between this and indiscriminate medical treatment for an acute illness? There is no evidence, no relevant theory, no relevant experimental demonstration, only her brain test that seems reasonable. Lu Chang'an is also a biology professor after all. How could he be fooled by her like this? Believe it or not, I'm really immortal. Author, Chulian Kui Kan Ru Xiahua. Chapter 520. Regardless of whether Sunangzio believed it or not, she had tried her best anyway. If it weren't for the unprecedented embryo that could witness the reproduction and growth of the strongest life on earth, Sunangzio would never want to get involved in such a mess. I think, this matter should be decided by myself. Qin Yinan stretched out his head from under the quilt, kicked the quilt and sat upright, brushing his hair with a little embarrassment. I don't think it's a guinea pig. Sunangzio didn't say anything. Why did he look down on the guinea pig? How great the guinea pig is. Sunangzio extracted experimental materials from himself and studied them himself. The most important thing is to worry about your body. Frequent fainting will also affect your daily life, Lu Chang'an said, not planning to continue the topic of nutritional supplements with Sunangzio. It doesn't matter, I will find someone to accompany me 24 hours a day to see if I faint again. 1 or 2 times doesn't mean anything. Qin Yinan himself was not very worried. If there is a problem, I'll ask the escort to contact you. Lu Chang'an thought for a while and nodded. He was not helpless about Qin Yinan's physical condition, but his methods were always not suitable due to his relationship with Qin Yinan. But if a life-threatening situation arises, then we can't control that much. Thank you. Lu Chang'an still thanks Sunangzio. Although your idea has no experimental or theoretical basis, it may be a direction of solving problems. He just wants to solve the problem more rigorously and objectively, which does not mean that he completely rejects Sunangzio's ideas. Many times, scientific problem solving starts with guessing ideas that have no experimental basis and is verified step by step. That means crossing the river by feeling for the stones and testing the truth in practice. But now there is no way to implement the plan proposed by Sunangzio casually. They can't just do whatever Sunangzio asks Lu Chang'an and Qin Yan'an to do, right? For her question, you should thank her. You are a family and I am always an outsider, right? Sunangzio still said in a resentful tone. Lu Chang'an didn't argue with her about this, but Sunangzio was different from him. She was too young after all, and things that happened more than 100 years ago could not be forgotten, as if they were the pain of yesterday. Her current condition shouldn't affect her daily life and work, right? Lu Chang'an still asks Sunangzio in a gentle tone. No problem when answering questions that required professionalism. Sunangzio's tone was calm and more rigorous. But I think that if such dizziness occurs again, it is that the gestational sac is sending a signal for further activation and it needs nutrition. I am very sure that even Qin Yan'an's physical fitness cannot be said to be 100% guaranteed to provide enough nutrients to support its growth. You need to provide life essence in a timely manner. There are no other nutrients provided to ordinary people. Use. Got it. Lu Chang'an nodded to express his thanks. He did not intend to dwell on the issue of nutritional supplement with Sunangzio. These matters were always observed and tried to be solved at the same time. Then I'll go back first. I have to go to work tomorrow. Qin Yan'an lifted the quilt and prepared to get off the bed. She was still a little afraid of Sunangzio and had to leave with Lu Chang'an. Otherwise, if Lu Chang'an left first, Qin Yan'an would be really worried. The situation when he faced Sunangzio alone. Although Sunangzio has behaved calmly so far, she has not had any extreme emotions or behavioral tendencies towards Qin Yan'an being pregnant with her husband's child. Lu Chang'an quickly brought her shoes over, a pair of very exquisite and sexy hollow mesh high heels. Qin Yan'an raised her legs, straightened her insteps, curled her toes together slightly and stretched them in, then held down the hem of her skirt and stood. He stood up and glanced at Lu Chang'an with a shy look. It turns out that this old man also knows how to serve people. Lu Chang'an was not worried about whether Qin Yan'an could wear high heels. After all, her physical fitness was completely different from that of ordinary women, and her so-called pregnancy state was also completely different from ordinary people. I may bother you again in the future. Lu Chang'an was still very polite to Sunangzio. Sunangzio took a deep breath and nodded casually. She finally had the feeling of grasping his weak spot, although Sunangzio didn't intend to do so, because the more she could control him, the more uncomfortable she felt. Dandan, Lu Chang'an turned around to look for Shangguan Dandan, only to find that she had already groped her way into the laboratory inside. Lu Chang'an pulled her out. Shangguan Dandan was wearing a suit that probably belonged to Sunangzio. He also had a stethoscope hanging on his body. He was holding a syringe in his hand. There was also a tube of suspicious liquid with unknown effects in the syringe. That tube of reagent can increase the human body's potential at a very low dilution dose, but at an inappropriate dose, 1 drop can poison 10,000 people. Sunangzio looked at Shangguan Dandan calmly and said. Shangguan Dandan was startled and quickly threw the needle into the trash can. Lu Chang'an took off her work clothes and stethoscope. Isn't this game of pretending to be a doctor in adult work clothes a favorite among children? How grown up are you? If the Zhu family hadn't taken over many of the Ye family's properties, Sunangzio would have wanted to ask Shangguan Dandan to compensate for this tube of medicine. Since it was the child brought by Lu Chang'an, Sunangzio didn't care about her anymore. It can poison 10,000 people. Shangguan Dandan sighed as he walked past Sunangzio. Sunangzio suspected that Shangguan Dandan was saying that she was poisonous, but she had no evidence and did not want to quarrel with Shangguan Dandan. Please stay at our house today. It's already very late. Qin Yan'an held Shangguan Dandan's hand and asked softly, lowering his head. Shangguan Dandan shook his head and pointed at Lu Chang'an. he will carry me back, and I can sleep on the way. Qinyanan glanced at Lu Chang'an and pouted, but didn't say anything. You can find someone to accompany you. He won't come until tomorrow. We'll stay at your place tonight. Lu Chang'an said that he was the one who made the decision. Shang Guandandan thought for a while and nodded. It's better to be in your own bed, Sunangzio said pointedly. It was a long night and it was normal for something to happen. Qinyanan's cheeks were slightly red. Listening to Sunangzio's taunting, she finally couldn't help but said, "Don't worry, I'm not as bold as you. Don't think you are the only one who remembers it, I haven't forgotten it either. When it comes to the skills in bed, you are still the best. I can't compare to you. For the first time, I was just like Feng Yutio Pai." Stop, Lu Chang'an heard that they started again and quickly stopped him, "Don't teach the children bad things." Shang Guandandan tilted his head and looked at him. Does the child refer to the Empress Dowager who is kind, upright, honest, elegant and majestic? Is the matter between these two daughters-in-law and you comparable to when you were in the wine pond and meat forest in Vyang Palace? Lu Chang'an spoke up and finally stopped taunting each other. Sunangzio sent the three of them out of the underground base and watched them leave. Qinyanan fainted at her home and was taken to the underground base by Sunangzio. She walked up the mountain with Lu Chang'an without driving. I have come a long way. After walking for a while, Shang Guandandan felt that he had tried his best. Sometimes I really regret getting you out of the coffin, Lu Chang'an said angrily. That's what men are like. They used to be so soft-hearted. They were willing to promise you, care about you, and love you no matter what. But when their goals are achieved, they will get tired of you after a while and no longer take you seriously. Shang Guandandan held Qinyanan's hand and imparted his mother-in-law's life experience with sincere words. Forget it, come up. Lu Chang'an was too lazy to explain or defend himself to Shang Guandandan, so he squatted slightly with his back to Shang Guandandan. Shang Guandandan nimbly climbed onto his back and lay on his back. After carrying Shang Guandandan for a while, Shang Guandandan fell asleep on Lu Chang'an's back just a short distance away from the Xiang University campus. What did you promise her before? What goals did you achieve? Seeing Shang Guandandan asleep, Qinyanan looked at Lu Chang'an with a teasing smile. Hey, I used to think that she and I had experienced some years together in ancient times, and there should always be some common topics. At that time, she was hiding in the coffin and refused to come out, so I said that I hope she can come out to accompany me. Me, that's all. Lu Chang'an shook his head with helpless amusement. Who knows, do you believe what she said? I just think what she said makes sense. Men are indeed like this. Their attitude before they get it is really different from their attitude after they get it. Women are the most attentive and can feel it. Qinyanan held Lu Chang'an's arm. When he only thought of her as an ordinary old friend, he was not willing to hold her arm like this until he confirmed that she was his sister. Not necessarily Lu Chang'an had to stand in a man's position. In short, a girl must not be easily obtained by a man, otherwise he will not cherish it after he gets it. Qinyanan said with deep understanding, with a little bit of reminder to himself in it. Once, I won a big prize, and the prize was a BMW. I cherished it very much. If it got a little dirty, I would wipe it carefully. Later, I worked hard to save money and bought a Wuling Hongguang. I have to haul bricks and cement through wind and rain. Lu Chang'an smiled. It's not a question of how to get it, the key is what kind of car it is. It's disgusting. You compare girls to cars. Qinyanan squeezed over and hit him on the shoulder with her fist. It was such a vulgar metaphor and joke. Shh, Lu Chang'an signaled her not to wake up Shang Guandandan. When they reached the mountain and put Shang Guandandan down, Lu Chang'an decided to personally check Qinyanan's physical condition. Recommend a book, The Path of the Swordsman. Who says you can't be diligent without elixirs? Who said that if you can't refine weapons, you won't have magic weapons? Who said that if you are frustrated by making a talisman, you will have no fighting power. The so-called sword that defeats all laws lies in confidence. When danger comes, your only reliance is the sword and nothing else. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I'm really immortal. Author, Chulian Kuikan Rusiahua. Chapter 521. When traveling, especially to places where you need to walk a lot to see the scenic spots, it is a painful thing to bring a child who is unwilling to walk. I believe everyone who has experienced it can understand. Fortunately, Lu Chang'an's physical strength was a little stronger than that of ordinary parents, so it was not too difficult to carry Shang Guandandan up Lushan Mountain, which was 300 meters above sea level. When they arrived at Qinyanan's house, Lu Chang'an threw Shang Guandandan into the guest room and closed the door. It seems that you can only sleep on the sofa tonight. Qinyanan smiled, took off her high heels and prepared to get a quilt and pillow for Lu Chang'an. She went to the vegetable market today, so she put on such sexy and charming high heels, because many women tend to be slovenly when they go to the vegetable market, and even wear loose pajamas with slippers, but they never expected a woman to appear in such a delicate, elegant, and sexy dress. When going to the vegetable market, it will bring great face and vain satisfaction to their men. Men like this feeling. A man's woman is like a woman's bag, revealing various expressions and is very important. It's a pity that Qinyanan is just showing her charming eyes to the blind. She doesn't have such a man to enjoy the sense of achievement, satisfaction, and vanity that comes from having her. I've slept in caves, under bridges, on rooftops, underwater, in trenches, anywhere else. Lu Chang'an didn't care. I can sleep wherever I want. Then you sleep under my bed. After Qinyanan finished speaking, he couldn't help laughing. If this situation really happened, I don't know what it would feel like. It seemed quite interesting. Lu Chang'an thought for a moment, then shook his head. Seeing that he really thought about it before rejecting it, Qinyanan couldn't help but wonder, what was he thinking just now that made him think he couldn't sleep under her bed? Lu Chang'an just felt that the height under the bed was limited after all. If he lay flat on it to sleep, wouldn't the bed turn over in the morning? You can't tell her this reason, lest she think he's bragging or teasing her. Are you sleepy now? Lu Chang'an got down to business. It's okay. Qinyanan felt her physical condition. She didn't know if it was due to psychological reasons. She felt that her body was a little lazy, like some post-pregnancy state, but it didn't feel like she was about to fight. I'll help you check the gestational sac problem again. Lu Chang'an was worried about Sunangzio's diagnosis. She had scientific instruments and he had superpowers. Since the basic requirement for joining the Zhu Fenglai sword sect is that you must have superpowers, apart from ordinary abilities such as being super rich and super eating, everyone in the sect, including the sect leader, of course has extraordinary superpowers. Qinyanan looked around, moved his hands apart and then lowered them to pat his skirt, indicating that there were no instruments for him to use. Qinyanan actually feels a little indescribable until now. Although she knows that she once had a rich life as Yesijin, in her daily life and habits, she still feels that she is just a teenager compared to her teenagers. A girl, just an adult woman with a slight sense of maturity. She has never been married, has never been in love, looks noble and cool, but actually longs for love, an ordinary, no, a very good-looking young woman with a good figure. When she was about 17 or 18 years old, Qinyanan sometimes looked at herself and thought that such a good-looking girl would take advantage of some stinky man in the future. Nowadays, she feels a little melancholy. The results of it? There is no stinky man who is cheap at all, but she has a child of a man who is not so stinky and even smells good. However, she cannot justifiably rely on him because the child in her belly has really grown up and seems to have no blood relationship with him. Relationship, this is what Sunangzio said. This is too unacceptable. How to check? Do you suspect that Sunangziu lied to us? Qin Yinan was not so easy to completely believe in Sunangziu. After all, with Sunangziu's methods, it seems that it is not impossible to control the test results of those instruments, although Sunangziu's doing so does not seem to be of any benefit to her, but for a cruel, cold, and arrogant woman, how can she be kind-hearted, gentle, and pleasant? What girls can guess? Qin Yinan felt so. I can't say I'm doubtful. It's just that for things like this, I'd better verify it myself before I can rest assured. Lu Chang'an finally asked Qin Yinan's opinion symbolically, is that okay? Qin Yinan nodded. You, Mr. Lu, have already made a decision. Besides cooperating with you, what else can you do? Go and change into your pajamas. You can lie down on the sofa or bed. Lu Chang'an pointed to the direction of the sofa and the bedroom. Qin Yinan clasped his hands in front of his chest and separated them. He looked at Lu Chang'an nervously. Why did he still need to change into pajamas? But Lu Chang'an didn't explain much. Qin Yinan turned around and walked stiffly to the bedroom. She no longer had the charm that she had naturally exuded by twisting her waist and hips in the past. Normally, Qin Yinan wouldn't think much about it, but last time he was in the hot spring room, he actually didn't do anything. It was just that he misunderstood. Anyway, after being seen by him, he always felt a little sick. Yes, it is always easy to feel ashamed and nervous after seeing him. Qin Yinan changed into her pajamas and lay down on her bed. She did feel a little more relaxed and not so nervous. Sunangziu was right at least to say that no matter what she did, being in her own bed was the most reassuring. Lu Chang'an knocked on the door. Qin Yinan answered, opened the door and came in. Seeing that Lu Chang'an also changed into pajamas, Qin Yinan couldn't help but think that after getting married, those young couples would also change into pajamas in the bedroom, and then prepare to do something. Qin Yinan's cheeks were slightly red, and her eyes were half open. Close your mind and remind yourself not to think wildly. It is just a normal test. Lu Chang'an is a person who can tell historical stories with a warm and fragrant jade in his arms for an entire night. Lu Chang'an sat on the edge of the bed and pulled up her pajamas to expose her abdomen. Why are you still getting goosebumps? Did I make you feel sick? Lu Chang'an laughed when he saw a few goosebumps suddenly appearing on her delicate skin. Nervous Qin Yinan's hand pulled the hem of her pajamas, and she turned her head and whispered with a blush on her cheeks. There is no need to be nervous, just don't be afraid. Lu Chang'an reminded in a calm tone. Are you going to disembowel me? Qin Yinan was not afraid. With him by her side, what was there to be afraid of? She is neither worried that someone can hurt her, nor does she believe that he will hurt her. This is the most comfortable sense of security. Lu Chang'an spit on her belly. Qin Yinan was not afraid, but she felt shocked on the outside and crispy on the inside, and stared at him dumbfounded. He also spread his saliva evenly on her belly. If it were someone else, Qin Yinan would be afraid that he would become violent. Control yourself. Lu Chang'an patted her trembling legs to signal her to stabilize her mood. I spit on you, do you think you can control yourself? Qin Yinan really has this urge, but she just spits casually. As a daughter of a famous family, she really can't do it. What I spit out is not saliva, it's ambergris jade liquid, the essence of life. Can I be the same as you? Lu Chang'an shook his head and told her not to compare herself with him casually. Yes, your saliva is ambergris jade liquid, the essence of life. If you spit some saliva on my stomach every day, your son, this child will grow up healthily and will be born in 10 or 8 years. Qin Yinan originally wanted to say son, but she couldn't let him think that she was relying on him. She was in this situation, didn't she have the right to be more reserved? Unless he takes the initiative to admit that it is his child, Qin Yinan will not insist on saying that the child in his belly is his. Qin Yinan is still a little concerned about some of the things he said to Sunangziu. The most important thing is that he hasn't been tested yet. Maybe it was Sunangziu who deceived him. I don't think so. Of course my saliva is effective, but the key is that your belly doesn't have the ability to absorb it, Lu Chang'an said regretfully. If my belly has this function, do you really have to spit on my belly every day? For 10 or 8 years, Qin Yinan imagined the scene and had to say seriously, then I would rather not give birth. This baby is dead, let it continue to sleep. That's no need. I can accumulate a lot of saliva and you can apply it on your belly. That's fine too, Lu Chang'an gave a solution. No, Qin Yinan angrily raised her hand and hit him. He didn't seem to be joking about this matter. I can find a way to modify your belly so that your belly can absorb it. How could Lu Chang'an be constrained by Sun Nangxiu's ideas? He has a better understanding of his own abilities and is of course better able to formulate a tailor-made plan. As long as Qin Yinan's belly has the ability to absorb his essence and transfer it to the gestational sac in her abdomen, wouldn't this solve the problem? There is no need for the intimate contact that Sun Nangxiu mentioned. Then I'll die, Qin Yinan said angrily. She didn't even say anything. Does he dislike her so much and try his best to avoid having anything to do with her? Although Qin Yinan didn't want to, as a man, she disliked him so straightforwardly. How could she lose face? Do you want a girl's reserve and shame anymore? Seeing that Qin Yinan was about to pull away from her pajamas in anger, Lu Chang'an quickly said gently, don't worry, let's find a way slowly. I'll check your body first. Qin Yinan rolled her eyes at him and said nothing. Lu Chang'an saw that her belly had a particularly soft sheen, so he spread his fingers and pressed them below her navel. Qin Yinan's body trembled slightly, and she couldn't help but let go of the hem of her pajamas, grabbed her pajamas, put her legs together, and her toes that had been loosened were caught together, and her little feet bent out of the solace of her feet. After all, she felt a little ashamed, but Qin Yinan didn't have time to be shy. She had already understood Lu Chang'an's words and told her not to be afraid. Can you not be afraid? This has nothing to do with a sense of security. It is purely about being nervous about the unknown and the abnormality of the body. Qin Yinan found that she seemed to have lost the feeling of pain, but could clearly feel something growing from the tips of his fingers and piercing her. Under the skin, it spreads like tree roots. The roots of the tree stretched in the soil. Qin Yinan felt that he was a piece of fertile soil at this time. Some roots were spreading and growing in his body little by little, passing through the skin tissue, passing through the fat and muscles under the epidermis, and penetrating layers of human tissue covered the organs in her body. Just like those capillary networks throughout the human body, they are everywhere. Qin Yinan opened her mouth, feeling somewhat fortunate that she could still speak, otherwise she wouldn't be able to speak, and would have to struggle nervously. What's going on? What are you doing? Qin Yinan asked with heavy breathing. I feel like something is drilling around in my stomach. Maybe it's roundworms, should you take some anti-worm medicine? Lu Chang'an calmed her down with a casual tone. No. I don't have to. Qin Yinan discovered that Lu Chang'an really didn't care about the things that girls particularly care about. Girls are all pure and clean, full of fairy spirit. How can they casually treat something as disgusting as roundworms? Involved. Okay, Lu Chang'an's hands left her skin and he wiped his fingers with the wet wipes on the bedside as a habit. Qin Yinan looked at his abdomen. He clearly felt like something had penetrated his skin just now, but now the surface of his skin was not smooth. She didn't think too much about how Lu Chang'an did it. She just took the wet wipe and wiped her abdominal skin without showing any signs of weakness, and then added, I'm going to take a shower later and wipe all your saliva, just wash it off. Lu Chang'an glanced at the bathroom door, nodded, and said nothing. Qin Yinan was a little suspicious of the way he looked at the bathroom door and the meaning of his nod, which hinted at what happened that night, but there was no evidence, so he could only blush silently, snorted lightly, and said nothing. Did you get any test results? Qin Yinan quickly said something serious to dispel the strange mood. There is indeed a gestational sac. This is not the first time I have done such a test. I have rich experience and it is not just a last resort, Lu Chang'an said with certainty. It is basically similar to the conclusion drawn by Sunangziu. The gestational sac is now in the activated state. It sends a signal to the mother's body, reminding you that your body is not in a sufficient state to fully provide nutrition, and you will faint. Qin Yinan opened his mouth and was mentally prepared. Lu Chang'an confirmed again, which completely calmed down his original mood of expectation or resistance. After accepting the reality, he felt much more at ease. It won't keep reminding you like this. When you haven't been able to provide enough nutrients, it will enter a dormant state to protect itself until it can absorb the nutrients it wants, Lu Chang'an affirmed. Anyway, I can't accept your method of transforming my belly into something that can absorb the nutrients in your saliva. It's perverted and disgusting. Qin Yinan told Lu Chang'an seriously that there was no need to discuss this matter. Okay, I'll think of a way. Lu Chang'an didn't insist. After all, she had to respect her own opinion on this matter. You also need some time to accept, think, and adjust your mentality, and then you can determine your final plan. We will discuss it carefully at that time as to how to handle this matter. Okay. Qin Yinan sat up and pressed her lower abdomen. Do you want to take a bath in the hot spring? If you want to take a bath, I will take a bath later. No. Lu Chang'an walked out of the bedroom door. Qin Yinan hugged Lu Chang'an from behind. Lu Chang'an grabbed her stretched out hands and asked with some confusion, is something wrong? Elder brother. I'm a little worried. It's okay, brother is here. Lu Chang'an pulled her hand away, turned around, and hugged Qin Yinan. He failed to protect her well and let her suffer alone. This situation will never happen again. I mean, Sunangziu, are you hiding something? Qin Yinan had to remind her brother. Lu Chang'an no longer wants Qin Yinan to regard Sunangziu as his sister-in-law. Qin Yinan is sure of this, so he often doesn't think too much about Sunangziu's thoughts and things. But Qin Yinan couldn't. Just as Sunangziu felt that Qin Yinan was a thorn in his side, Qin Yinan was also wary of Sunangziu casting a net and waiting for Lu Chang'an to get into the net himself. What did she hide? Lu Chang'an had already checked Qin Yinan's body. He could confirm that Qin Yinan was still in good health and that the gestational sac did not threaten her life. So if Sunangziu had concealed something else, he would also don't care. She deliberately emphasized that yes, Sijin was in a dangerous period that night, and she was in a safe period. It is easy to make people think that the days when this kind of gestational sac condition can occur are always the same that night. In fact, she was not just with that night. You're having sex. What's more, since ordinary people's common sense of fertility is not adapted to us, then the idea of a safe period and a dangerous period is adapted to it. The more Qin Yinan thought about it, the more likely it became. You mean, she might also be pregnant? After Qin Yinan's reminder, Lu Chang'an frowned slightly. Qin Yinan nodded. Lu Chang'an felt that this might not be impossible. When they met at the underground base that day, she kept saying that she could have a baby with him. She seemed confident in her words. Maybe it was because she had confirmed that she also had a gestational sac in her body. At the same time, what she really needed at that time was the nutrition provided by Lu Chang'an, not the matter of trying to have a child with Lu Chang'an. Today she gave Qin Yinan a test, probably because she wanted to test that the situation in her would also appear in other people. Otherwise, if Qin Yinan fainted, why would she go to do a pregnancy test for Qin Yinan? Is this possible? Seeing Lu Chang'an's thoughtful expression, Qin Yinan asked worriedly. It's possible, but it's just a possibility. Let's not worry about it too much and be suspicious all day long. That's the style of fighting in the palace and in the house. Lu Chang'an waved his hand. Go, take a bath and feel comfortable. Go to sleep. In your situation, you don't need to change any living habits or eating habits. Everything will remain the same. This gestational sac has existed for hundreds of years and is very strong. Qin Yinan smiled, left his embrace, and went to the bathroom to take a bath. Lu Chang'an's mentality was as calm as a well. The hug just made him feel that before she gave birth to a baby, she might not be able to provide the nutrients needed by her gestational sac, but if she gave birth to a baby, she couldn't provide enough nutrition. How could that be possible? Lu Chang'an walked out the door. As soon as he opened the door, he saw Shang Guandandan. It was obvious that her ear was pressed against the door just now. Lu Chang'an looked at Shang Guandandan expressionlessly. Shang Guandandan stood up straight, glanced at Lu Chang'an, took 2 steps back, slowly turned around and walked little by little towards the guest room. Then he felt that Lu Chang'an hadn't moved yet, so he quickly quickened his pace. Lu Chang'an reached out and grabbed her back. "Let me go, I'm not a chicken," Shang Guan danced and struggled. "I'm going to put you in a coffin and lock the coffin with iron chains," Lu Chang'an threatened. Shang Guandandan felt that it was a false alarm. She thought he would lose control of his emotions and do something treasonous and contrary to human ethics. As for the use of iron chains to lock the coffin, Shang Guandandan didn't care much, so she gave up her struggle and let Lu Chang'an twist her. Even if she is locked in a coffin, she still has a mobile phone to play with, and she can also play with the mobile phone to run the beard, but those who play with the mobile phone to run the beard, the winning or losing is too big. Shang Guandandan can't afford it, and he doesn't have that much money. As for those who played for 5 cents, no one played with her at such a small age. Shang Guandandan could only play the standalone version. You can also read novels. Shang Guandandan thought that she had already read many new chapters, but she had subscribed and voted for them. This was called supporting. In fact, the most important point is, how can the iron chain lock her precious coffin? So Shang Guandandan was not afraid at all. "Aren't you asleep?" Lu Chang'an was just saying that. He also felt that the coffin was a bit too powerful. As long as she woke up, she would probably be able to control the coffin. A mere iron chain should not be able to trap her. "I sleep the most peacefully only in a small coffin." Shang Guandandan immediately covered his mouth and showed a sleepy expression, indicating that she was actually really sleepy. If there was nothing else, he should considerately let her go back. Room for sleeping. Can you maintain your elegant posture as the Queen Mother? How can the Queen Mother do such a thing as listening to the corner? Lu Chang'an pointed to Qinyanan's door and said. He was sure that the sound insulation decoration in Qinyanan's room was very good, but for Shang Guandandan it is unknown whether this kind of person is effective. You must know that she can often listen to the sound of dishes and chopsticks being placed upstairs to determine whether it is time to do housework or whether it is time for breakfast, and to determine whether she should show up promptly. The elegance of the Queen Mother, hasn't it been seen by others? Just like many emperors who are full of majesty in the court, they are still the babies of Chenghuan when they return to the Queen Mother. Shang Guandandan didn't think so and moved towards Lu Chang'an. "Wave. I won't bow down to you in front of you, let alone act like a baby." Lu Chang'an knew the meaning of her wave and refused without hesitation. Shang Guandandan was disappointed, but she had held him in her arms before. Didn't he look like a baby at that time? Hey, men are very concerned about face after all. Forget it, as long as he will always be her baby in her heart. "I'm going to bed." Shang Guandandan went back to his room gloomily. Lu Chang'an looked at Shang Guandandan's back, suddenly his heart skipped a beat. The keen intuition possessed by higher creatures made him wonder. Qinyanan had it, and Sunangziu might have it, but what about Shang Guandandan? Lu Chang'an would not take the initiative to check Sunangziu's physical condition, but he did want to help Shang Guandandan check it up. Please vote for the monthly ticket for the big chapter. I can probably write a side story related to this chapter and send it to the V group before 12 o'clock tonight, but it will not affect the main plot, which is just a short story about Lu Chang'an and Qinyanan. You can read it or not. I recommend a book called The Super Card Maker. It is a work by the great master 90 degrees below zero, with more than 1 million words. This is the story of a programmer who engraves a CD in a different world. I'm really immortal. Author, Chulian Kuikan Rusiahua. Chapter 522. The last thing in this world cannot be delayed is a good night's sleep. Many people devote their night and bed to their mobile phones, but do not know how to enjoy the leisure and comfort of falling asleep soundly. Lu Chang'an's sleep was not affected by the sudden onset of the gestational sac. For him, no matter where he slept or who he slept with, it was a pleasure. Just as many people know that reading is the lowest cost investment, people should also know that sleeping is also the lowest cost enjoyment. Lu Chang'an slept until he woke up in the morning. He opened the window of the living room and welcomed the breath of the mountains and forests brought by the breeze. The slightly moist air stained the skin on his lips and nose. He took a deep breath to expel the turbid air from his lungs. This kind of it felt more satisfying to him than breathing like a freshwater fish in the water. Of course, many marine life states are also very interesting, such as becoming the most powerful sea creature in the world and crossing the 7 seas. It's just that it's not very convenient now. After all, humans are now the overlords on the ocean surface. 1 or 2 aircraft carriers can solve the problem for truly powerful marine life. But if such a conflict occurs, it will be difficult to comfortably use this kind of ocean. The state of living beings' lives? So, just be a human being. Hearing some movement in the kitchen, Lu Chang'an walked over and saw Qinyanan had already gotten up and was busy wearing an apron. The apron is just enough to cover her vest and shorts. Viewed from the front, her waist is slender and her legs are slender. The beautiful woman is busy in the kitchen. It is always the best scene in the fantasies of many unmarried men. It would be better if she only wears an apron. After the man gets up, he hugs her from behind. There is no need to make breakfast. Eating her first is the most touching delicacy in the morning. What are you going to eat today? Lu Chang'an was concerned about what he had always been most concerned about. I went to the guest room to get a blanket in the morning, and I heard Duntun talking in his sleep about eating meat buns, etc. I'll make some meat buns. Qinyanan glanced at him, his expression and tone were as usual, there is no warmth and tenderness revealed because she is the mother of a child. A person's state of mind is too strong, and sometimes he seems heartless. I don't want to eat meat buns, please give me some noodles, Lu Chang'an requested, and he suspected that Shang Guandandan was not talking in his sleep at all. Who is still talking in his sleep so early in the morning? They don't even pretend to be like each other, so they just deceive Qinyanan. You will eat whatever I do. Qinyanan refused his request and suppressed Mrs. Lu with great force. Okay, when Lu Chang'an is waiting to eat the food cooked by others, he will never ask for this or that. Good boy, then I'll feed you. Qinyanan smiled and blinked. Naughty. Lu Chang'an raised his hand and then took it back, because when An Nuan was naughty, he would habitually pat the volleyball. Thinking of An Nuan, he asked, last time An Nuan and I were here. At that time, you have prepared a lot of breakfast options. That has a special meaning. Qinyanan nodded. No wonder she said you provoked her, Lu Chang'an said with some admiration. It is true that only women understand the struggle between women. Yes, the steak means that I am healthier than her, and she is too thin. The Korean cold noodles mean that I can sing, dance, and have many talents. The steamed buns mean that, it means that I have bigger breasts than her, and the rice noodles mean that my waist is as thin as hers. As for the fruit salad, of course she said I was sweeter than her, and the last 2 omelets, well, he laughed at her. Qinyanan actually didn't have so many thoughts at the time, it was just a manifestation of subconsciousness, so it makes sense to explain it so far-fetched. Anyway, that girl, I also understood it. Lu Chang'an thought for a while, then cupped his hands to express his admiration, but was speechless. Qinyanan prepared breakfast and placed it in the dining room. When he was about to wake Shang Guandandan up, the guest room door opened and Shang Guandandan happened to walk out and came to the dining room. There are meat buns to eat. Shang Guandandan sat down with his skirt, looking a little surprised but very satisfied. She is worthy of being the daughter-in-law who makes Shang Guandandan the most satisfied. She has long said that Qinyanan is easy to have children, and now she is indeed pregnant. She also understands her mother-in-law's wishes very well. She enters the kitchen, exits the hall, and sets her gums. I know that Zhou Shuling and Lu Chang'an sell meat buns at Beilong's restaurant. Her lobster meat is full of gravy, which is very creative and tastes very good. I happen to have a fresh king crab here, and I use crab leg meat, and the cheese is made into meat stuffing, and the outside is wrapped in thin dough. It tastes like a burst of pulp, so it should taste good. Qinyanan stood in front of Shang Guandandan and bent down to introduce the steaming meat buns. You're interested? Shang Guandandan nodded appreciatively, then pointed to a small bowl of noodles and said, "Does this clear soup noodle also use crab meat?" "Yes, after all, it's a big king crab. The crab leg meat alone is more than enough to make steamed buns. I used some of it for the bottom, and seasoned it with butter. The rest of the crab legs are grilled with salt and pepper charcoal. I hope you can also. I like it." Qinyanan also brought over the fruit plate and sparkling water. "What a good boy. That fierce woman definitely doesn't have such thoughts." Shang Guandandan pulled the back of Qinyanan's hand. "You have been busy all morning. Sit next to me and have a meal." Qinyanan got her wish, and of course she wanted to be praised. As for the old man Lu Chang'an, he sat opposite and ate silently without a word of praise. He thought this was just her normal operation, and Qinyanan didn't mind. After breakfast, Qinyanan drove Shang Guandandan back. Lu Chang'an did not get in the car on the way down the mountain because Qinyanan's car did not have a dog seat and could only seat 2 people. Lu Chang'an slowly walked down the mountain and passed by the Iwan Pavilion. At this time, the scenery of the forest was no longer dyed. It rained yesterday and it was especially cold today. The cold and damp feeling in the south in winter was felt in the grey-brown stones. Cold water and skinny branches and leaves filled the air. Even if Lu Chang'an could tolerate such humidity and cold, there was no doubt that such weather was not satisfactory. Fortunately, Lu Chang'an, like most southerners, can survive this winter without heating by relying on his integrity. Ordinary southerners may also need to add auxiliary actions such as shaking their legs to combat the wet and cold weather. Passing through Lushan Academy under the Iwan Pavilion, Lu Chang'an walked to the asphalt road between campuses and saw a Rolls-Royce driving slowly and steadily. It should be Zhu Huntang's car. The little fairy came to school. The car stopped next to Lu Chang'an. Zhu Huntang didn't wait for the bread man to open the door. She walked out and took out an umbrella from the car door. There was a bit of wind in the morning, which made her feel chilly. "Grandpa." "Good morning." Zhu Huntang was obviously a little happy to meet Grandpa Lu by chance. "Good morning, little sheep," Lu Chang'an also greeted. "Why are you calling people like a fairy sheep, and now a lamb again?" Zhu Huntang opened the umbrella and asked delicately. "This makes it look like we have a good relationship." "I don't believe it. Would people with good relationships treat others as mounts?" Zhu Huntang just thought of BAA a few times, but held it back because she had already woken up and she could not consciously become a fairy sheep. "Do you think anyone can be my mount?" Lu Chang'an reminded her in a calm tone. "I'm giving you face." "I'm so proud." Zhu Huntang sighed with emotion. Lu Chang'an and Zhu Huntang walked slowly. Lu Chang'an found that even Zhu Huntang had stronger legs than Shang Guandandan. However, considering that Zhu Huntang was a sheep after all, it was natural that he had stronger legs. "I wonder which animal has stronger legs, Shang Guandandan's fruit horse or fairy sheep? Maybe Zhu Huntang will be completely defeated." While thinking about all the messy things, he and Zhu Huntang were walking slowly, and unexpectedly met Sunangziu in front of the teaching building. "This is my cousin." Zhu Huntang was a little surprised to meet Sunangziu, because she knew that her cousin was as good as herself. She was more casual in class and did not often appear in places like the teaching building. Relatively speaking, Zhu Huntang feels that he is relatively abiding by school rules and regulations. We know each other. Lu Chang'an smiled. Sunangzio looked at Zhu Huntang, then at Lu Chang'an, and looked at Lu Chang'an with some uncertainty. When you and Xiao Tang are together, do you feel a natural sense of closeness? Lu Chang'an looked at Sunangzio suspiciously. Was this something he meant, or was he digging a trap? Yes, yes, yes. Zhu Huntang nodded vigorously, and then pulled Lu Chang'an's sleeves. Because of the feeling of being a good granddaughter and grandpa, Zhu Huntang still liked it very much. It's always closer than the boring relationship between the fairy sheep and the old man riding the sheep. I didn't let you speak, Sunangzio said angrily. Little cousin, you are so majestic. Do I need your permission to speak? Zhu Huntang didn't care about his little cousin's bad attitude. Lu Chang'an still only looked at Sunangzio, and then at Zhu Huntang. Did Sunangzio's words deliberately lead him to think about the relationship between Zhu Huntang and him? This is definitely just digging a trap. How could Zhu Huntang be related to him? After all, Zhu Huntang is not at all superior to ordinary people in either his brain or his body. What I mean is that Lu Chang'an is a suave man and has many beauties around him, all of whom have an ambiguous relationship with him. It's just that Xiao Tang doesn't seem to have such an ambiguous relationship with him. It feels like he treats Xiao Tang as a little sister or something. Sunangzio explained herself, a little casually, and then took Zhu Huntang's hand. Let's go, I asked someone to buy you some new skirts, why don't you go and take a look? So Zhu Huntang skipped class. Lu Chang'an watched the two of them leave. Sunangzio was really able to assess the situation and dig holes at will, but what was the point? Lu Chang'an was determined and was not disturbed by Sunangzio. I recommend a new book, The Future of 7th Section. You can tell the style just by looking at the name, and it has 2 more sections than 5 sections.